You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
I think you'll find the balloon enclosure over there, just past the Egyptian pavilion.
Thank you.
I wish I could offer you my assistance, but I'm already a little late for my appointment.
I'm so sorry.
And don't forget, as soon as you find this young lady, bring her straight to my office. I shall protect her by 5 o'clock. Goodbye to you, my dear, and good luck.
You haven't got much time, Mr. Quick.
Commissioner, what's the use of kidding ourselves? We can't track down an unknown killer in 2 days.
He's absolutely right, and there's only one way to do this. You get on the radio and panic the city?
Now, wait a minute.
Herewith recorded is the story of a silent, savage menace. How for 3 days a great American city found itself outside the United States of America. The events, incidents, and emotions of the people who were a part of it, who found time running out as they looked into the face of mortal peril.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on. Invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss 2 films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoid, you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are going ambulance-specific thrill ride mode, so join that sleaze.
That's right. We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover as well. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for I don't know how many years now. A number of them. There's like 180, I think, bonus episodes, as well as 150 of our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre movies on the show. So if you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast, we'd recommend doing that. And speaking of which, we had a number of people make the jump, so we're going to give them shout outs here. We had Ahmed Nima. We had Cameron McNutt, CT13, Deacony Houston, a Wombat, Ian Williams, Tom Ward, who signed up for an entire year of the show. And I believe actually also at our $10 a month tier, it got a little bit of a discounted rate monthly for getting an entire year, and is also going to be joining us for all the monthly virtual screenings, which we try to do on the last Thursday of any given month. So thank you, shout out to them. We had Volgtek Tulek sign up. We had Riley White, Rockford Rowley, Lover of Swag, Finley, Stephen Machuga, Daryl Bowen, James Green, Matt Quicksell, who signed up for at the annual tier for an entire year, Ezekiah Bates, T, Alex S., who actually upgraded from $5 a month to $10 a month and will be joining us for the monthly virtual screening as well. And last but not least, David Jones. So thanks so much to all of you folks. Hope you're enjoying all those bonus episodes. We appreciate the support. That's the one plug. As always, the other plug is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you were listening on either one of those platforms, give us a good old rating and a review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for our show, you can get that put on basically anything that you folks can think of. And you folks have thought of a lot of stuff. You have gotten notebooks, pillows, hoodies, coffee mugs. If you are interested in that, the link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis. Joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over here on the main feed would have heard from us, where we would have been in the thick of Noirvember discussing one of our favorite Hollywood B-noir visual technicians, Mr. Joseph H. Lewis, a guy who we talked about at length having an incredible skill for punching up B-movie scripts with just pure craftsmanship. And we talked about his double feature of the horny and violent and tragic kind of proto-Bonnie and Clyde doomed lovers on the run armed robbery thriller he did called Gun Crazy from 1950, which was just incredible and had some amazing heist sequences in it. And then we paired it with his kind of visually poetic approach to a hard-boiled gangster B-noir procedural movie called The Bing Combo from 1955, which had Richard Conte prior to The Godfather going pretty heavy on his gangster villain, doing like a pretty horrific torture sequences in it. And both movies, incredible uses of fog.
Oh yeah. Those 2 finales are some of my favorite in all of noir that I've seen. Honestly, his control is unbelievable, and yes, absolutely a master of fog.
Yeah, so we haven't heard that episode. That was 2 weeks ago over on the main feed. And then last week over on the Patreon feed exclusively for the patrons over there in honor of both celebrating their 50th anniversaries and sharing some connective tissue in terms of updating old school obsessive film noir detectives, but with a new Hollywood style and political paranoia and bleakness. We had a discussion of two iconic 1974 neo-noir conspiracy thriller masterpieces. We talked about Roman Polanski's very gorgeous and upsetting new Hollywood pastiche of a Raymond Chandler-esque 1930s LA noir in Chinatown. You may have heard of this one. And we paired it with Francis Ford Coppola's character study of obsession and loneliness as essentially an anxious Hitchcockian like espionage voyeur thriller set in the world of freelance surveillance tech dorks. The Conversation from also 1974.
Yeah, both masterpieces, but I have to say The Conversation might be the best movie ever made. Hard to say. Face Off will always have it'll always be a battle, but after watching The Conversation every single time, I'm like, oh my God, I don't think there's much better than this.
Is a movie about a guy being lonely and fiddling with audio tech equipment, you might be Jamie's favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't been introduced yet, but The Conversation is like the movie to watch with your dad. Like if you want... If your dad's like, what do you want to throw on? Be like, I know a guy who loves audio.
I totally agree. Yep. It's that blowout. I mean, if you have a guy just going tech crazy and he's completely alone, that's my movie.
If you have a dad who like can't rest easy until he's like filled with the settings of your TV for like 20 minutes into a movie, you gotta show him The Conversation.
Yeah. It touches that thrill for them, and then also it has Gene Hackman, who is just like exactly who dads want to see on screen. Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. The dad, the cinema dad.
The Maslow hierarchy of needs pyramid for dads is actually just a Venn diagram.
Gene Hackman is on one side. Yeah, it's great.
Audiophile on the other.
Yeah. So if you haven't heard that episode, again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. That was last week's bonus episode. But moving on to this week, she is so eager. She's already jumped in.
I'm so sorry.
They have the no, it's fine. Meg brings a wonderful amount of chaos to our show every time she's on. This is why she gets asked to return all the time. And she has been asked to return once again. For those who haven't somehow heard a Meg episode, she is like us, a genre film fanatic. She's a freelance film writer for places such as Film School Rejects and CinemaScope magazine. And she is once again here to give us another bizarre, very specifically paired combination of movies. But welcome back, Meg. How you doing?
Oh, so good. I definitely don't have pneumonic plague. I'm not contagious. I've got all my shots. Also, the second movie we're going to see seems to suggest that there's like a vaccine for pneumonic plague or any variant of plague. Not true. It's a bacteria. You can't vaccinate for that.
Well, hold on. We're already going to get into an argument. They specifically say it's the pneumonic plague, though.
No, I know it doesn't matter. It's all Yersinia pestis. It's all bacterial. Like they can just give them antibiotics, but the second film we're gonna watch like strongly suggests that there's a vaccine for plague. And I'll take onus with that.
Well, with the power of Widmark, he will save the day. So
yeah, true.
There is. I've gotten it. I've been getting the shot every year, so I don't know.
Well, what have you been getting?
They've been lying to me. But
silly boy shot.
But yeah, so Meg, we've had you on obviously a couple of times. We've talked about some 90s erotic thrillers. We've talked about some feel bad snowy westerns. Last time we had you on, we talked specifically a Jack the Ripper themed double feature.
And hold on, all three of these like branches of the tree, I think, do feed back into film noir. Like I think erotic thrillers are like very obviously indebted to film noir. I think a lot of like later westerns, many of which are snowy, have this kind of like distrust of authority and kind of like mopiness that I think is a symptom of like a greater noir genetic inheritance. And then I also think how can I make this work? Jack the Ripper is noir because
he's noir coded just as a guy.
There is a detective, so it all works.
You know who's noir coded? James Spader. So there we go. It's all working out.
Yeah.
There you go. But this week we asked you specifically to pick a film noir pairing, and she was like,
hey, you gave me a framework. You gave me a rubric.
I knew we were in for a treat when she was like, well, this one's sort of a noir. I don't know. And I was like, okay, what are you thinking here? So Meg, what is the double feature today? And explain yourself.
Oh man, the explain yourself section of these intros is getting more and more accusatory every time.
No, actually, this one makes a lot of sense to me.
This is arguably my most makes sense pairing. The first one is So Long at the Fair, and the second one is Panic in the Streets, which I like to listen to in my head to the tune of Islands in the Stream, and I would highly encourage that everyone else do that. The Dolly Parton, I can't remember who the guy is, song. It's a movie title where you're like, it's a record. It's going to sound like the song if you think about it. And the theme is pneumonic plague, baby.
Kind of a spoiler alert for the first one, unfortunately.
I mean, which is why they're paired like that. So sorry, but that's if you come to a podcast like this, I feel.
Oh, this is a spoiler show. Everyone knows they're getting spoiled. So.
Oh yeah,
you're inoculated for the spoilies.
It was funny though, just watching it, because I was at a certain point going, so when does the plague part come into play, where they're actually like they're fusing that theme together, and then it's like boom for the last 5 minutes.
There it
is. So I need to know, Jamie, did you watch Panic in the Streets first?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
A big mistake. I told Josh that the order.
I mean, I could have told Jamie. I did not tell Jamie, because normally we do the more popular one first. But yeah, at the same time, I also specifically, Meg said, don't look up anything that happens in So Long at the Fair.
Yeah,
so I went in blind, and I was like, well, clearly this has a twist. And I was like, oh boy, does it.
And specifically, the order in this instance is like So Long at the Fair is extremely B-movie coded. It's very like appetizer for Panic in the Streets. But yeah, the through line is pneumonic plague, which is of the 3 strains of the plague of Yersinia pestis, the most deadly because it spreads so dang fast. So even though it like presents as just like pneumonia, pretty much, there's no like buboes or pus, like there's no kind of like medieval physical symptoms. It kill real good because it's airborne. More fun facts to come.
Yeah. So if you wanted to see 1950s like film noir sleuths dealing with the Black Plague, this is the double feature of movies that you have been looking for, and we're going to jump into it.
I gotta say, there's got to be an intersection of noir fans who are also plague people like me, and I'm here for you.
They're very excited.
Yeah. So let's jump into it. Let's kick things off with So Long at the Fair. All right, we are talking So Long at the Fair, the 1950 British film noir thriller directed by Terence Fisher and Anthony Darnborough, written by Hugh Mills, who was adapting Anthony Thorne's 1947 novel that goes by the same title, and starring Gene Simmons as a British tourist in France to see the 1889 Paris exhibition with her brother, who is forced to go sort of noir detective mode when she falls asleep in her hotel, and both her brother and his room mysteriously disappear, and no one except her even really seems to remember having seen him or the room. Very spooky. This is only our second time talking about legendary British B filmmaker Terence Fisher, who was famous for his run of gothic hammer horror films in the late 1950s, early 1960s, where he took the old school elegance of the universal monsters like Frankenstein and Dracula and updated them for modern audiences by making them a little bit more overtly sexual and bloody and very vibrantly, colorfully photographed. In the process of doing so, made now iconic British thespians icons like Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, who then were kind of like TV and supporting actors, into legitimate international genre movie stars, especially to U.S. audiences, which is why nerds like George Lucas and Peter Jackson eventually hired them for their geek shit. But before that, nerds,
these absolute fucking dorks.
That's right.
Get them, Josh.
We're starting that way. They're not going to listen to a film noir episode. It's fine.
What if this was the one they were going to listen to?
You know, nobody likes Lord of the Rings around here. Come on, right? You know, Christopher Lee is
besmirch Star Wars now, but we cannot say bad things about the Lord of the Rings.
I'm still shocked, appalled, and scandalized that you haven't done more Terence Fisher.
I know it's one of those things.
Is that my fault? Yeah. Is it like who do I blame here?
I wasn't going to say anything, but we could like a little bit. The last time we actually talked about him, I think, was when we did Curse of the Werewolf.
Walking through a field full of mines and not stepping on any of them. Like, yeah, Curse of the Werewolf fucking rips.
With Oliver Reed.
Yeah, no, with baby Oliver Reed in multiple senses of the word. Yeah, no, Curse of the Werewolf slaps real hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
even so, there's still so much Terence Fisher, so many rocks to flip over.
Oh, yeah. There was, and we are going to be definitely getting into the Hammer horror stuff because he was so, because I've seen quite a lot of them, and he was really, really good at essentially replicating the kind of traditionally handsome look of like old Hollywood movies and like production design and costuming and photography, which I think is all true of this film too.
Yeah, the ultimate jobber. I think the final boss of like jobber directors is Terence Fisher.
Yeah, but I also like that he was willing to be a bit weirder and darker when it came to like, you know, employing some like supernatural element or like some perverse character psychology or something like that. So it was cool to kind of go back and see one of his earlier movies before he got the gig at Hammer Films. And it makes sense that even working in like a noir-y register, there is like a horror component to this thriller that was based on the 1890s urban legend known as the Vanishing Hotel Room or the Vanishing Lady, which has since inspired a number of filmmakers, including Hitchcock for his 1938 film The Lady Vanishes, which in typical Hitchcock fashion is the same story but on a train instead of a hotel room, and novelists obviously including Anthony Thorne here, which is, you know, who wrote the material that's being adapted here. But yeah, this is a really cool example of, you know, someone who has kind of just a steady hand and could very elegantly, you know, produce something like this, but also, you know, found a way to be like, we are going to combine noir and we are going to navigate this in a very eerie, shadowy, almost kind of horror-esque way and do a very psychologically engaged plot where it is, you know, is this character crazy? Are they being just driven mad? You know, what exactly is it that's happening here? And we've talked about like gaslight thriller noirs too, like Joseph H. Lewis with My Name is Julia Ross, which was something I thought about a little bit.
I was going to mention that one, yeah.
Yeah, just in terms of like a B noir or something.
Bunny Lake is missing. Like this is a very like established kind of like Hamlet of noir, of women getting gaslit into infinity that kind of like crosses over with gothic noir, which I think this film might have been originally curated on Criterion Channel with gothic noir. But
that makes a lot of sense.
This is an entire like suburb of multiple genres wherein a lady is like, I'm pretty sure this happened, and everyone's like, no, and the audience is like, okay, well, shenanigans are afoot, and we're off to the races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like even the first 30 minutes, I would say this movie is more along the lines of My Name is Julia Ross, where it doesn't feel as, I mean, there's a mystery just given that we don't know what happened to the brother, but it still feels more horror-esque, or it almost feels kind of surreal at first until, you know, it starts to unravel, of course.
I mean, the real horror of this film is that a man suffering from the plague had to go to a Moulin Rouge mantra. like if you're familiar with the geography of Paris, like this man had to go all the way from the arrondissement where the Eiffel Tower is halfway across town to go to a dance show while suffering from the plague.
Yeah.
Like
you do.
Like,
it is funny to. I think this was in your review, Meg. Even it is funny to think because that character, the brother, is such a douche. Like he's so dull and lifeless and just doesn't want to do anything. And then when you find out that
he's so relatable.
yeah, you find out that he's been sick this whole time with the plague, and you're like, oh, okay, of course you didn't want to go out to dinner in busy Paris. Yeah.
Yeah, no, like when you're watching it the first time, you're like, this guy's a stick in the mud. What the hell? And then after the film, you're like, oh.
Yeah, he was dealing with quite a bit. We come to find out.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I liked that this kind of starts in a kind of sweet, kind of unassuming and almost like elegant register with when we're introduced to the two Barton siblings, which is the young and romantic Vicky, played by Gene Simmons, who was then on a pretty incredible run of 1940s movies that included like David Lean's Great Expectations and Powell and Pressburger's Black Narcissus, where she was one of the nuns in the Himalayan mountains. And her character is just very excited at the prospect of seeing the beautiful sights of Paris when we open on the boat with them, and especially the exhibition. And she's being taken by her older brother, Johnny, played by David Tomlinson, or Mr. Banks, the guy who hires Mary Poppins to nanny his kids. That's the only thing I know him from.
I will also say, like, a fun detail that I noted rewatching it for this podcast is that they're, I believe, like, entering Paris, or they're passing by Marseille on their way to Paris or something, because they're coming from Naples by ship. And that is almost exactly the route that the bubonic plague hit France with.
Oh, they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing.
Well, they either did, or Marseille is like a port town, and that's just like where you'd go. But being like a plague guy, I was like, Marseille, you say? Interesting. I was like, is that for me?
That's really the plague nerds out there.
Yeah, these characters are not plague nerds. There's literally no hint at all that that's anything that they are thinking about or talking about. No. Like they are just
there's as we will we'll talk about, I think, a bit later. Any sense of public health or fear of contagion is not found in this film.
No.
That is not a concern at all.
Which is why it's cool for the pairing, because Panic in the Streets is like the only thing on its mind, and it's on its mind from basically like the get-go. Yes. So whereas here it is just like, it's almost like a Paris travelogue for a little bit. Both these movies also have incredible location work, we'll say.
It is interesting that it ends up being such an afterthought, because it is just focused on the perspective of the sister trying to find out what the mystery is. When you do find out what it is and why he's being hidden, you can say that the reason is because they were concerned for the public safety, but it is still it is kind of funny to just take on that perspective only when such a massive catastrophe could have taken place.
Oh, we're so jumping the gun at this point, but the selfish part of me really wants a remake, but set around the Taylor Swift Eras tour, where it's like Toronto public health being like, we can't tell the Swifties that there's an outbreak of the plague.
The whole city will be burned down to the ground.
We need the money of the Swifties. We can't tell them about the plague.
Man. They would have done it
with a riot.
Yeah. Yeah, the ultimate plague vector, the Eras tour.
Well, yeah, in this one, you would have had the brother. He wouldn't have been like more like worldly and like being like, I've been to Paris before. Sure. He's like, I've seen Taylor before. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that great. Precisely. And to his sister, who's like so excited, just like staring in awe at the city skyline. He's definitely being like an asshole about it.
This remake writes itself.
This isn't bad. There's something here.
I'm full of ideas.
Yeah. But I will say I was impressed, even though it had it's definitely a B movie. I was surprised at how much effort was put into the travelogue quality. Like clearly they shot some of this on actual location, and the stuff that's not shot on location is like fairly decent studio sets and matte paintings with the Eiffel Tower in the background and stuff that looked fairly good. And even when they it wasn't a lot of B movies you'll see get contained to the few locations that they have. This one took a break and would be like, no, we're gonna go to the fucking Moulin Rouge, or we're gonna get into the dancing and drinking. There's animals and balloons and confetti everywhere. We're gonna go for this big fancy dinner, and all the gents are rocking crazy top hats and canes. The amount put into even just the costuming, it seems like a more expensive movie than it is.
Yeah.
I mean, the hot air balloon blows up. That's money on screen.
Meg loves to jump the gun. She's crazy about this.
Much like the plague, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm just saying there's money on the screen.
That was definitely, it was on point. Like that was definitely a moment where I went, oh, that feels like an action movie beat in like this B noir. It's crazy.
Is this guy going to go on to direct, I don't know, James Bond?
There's even a nice bit of like a couple moments in the train station where she's, you know, we'll get to all these plot points, but she's faking that she's going to leave because she's being stalked by two specific people. And just the way the camera pans through the crowd, it actually makes it look a lot larger than it is. It might even be on location, I'm not sure, but it looks really authentic. And they even have this nice shot where it closes up on her face as like the train smoke is kind of going in front of her and it dissipates as she walks towards the camera. So yeah, there's a lot of moments where I think it punches up what probably was a fairly low budget, I think. Yeah, $132,000, which I don't know what that would be in 1950, but still, you know, low for sure.
Well, and I think too that there's, you know, there is I tried to find out more information about what this co-directing situation was like, because I don't want to just say like I don't want to go full Terence Fisher or tourist and be like Anthony Darnborough didn't shoot anything, that asshole, right, and his name is on it. But like there's a lot of great craft too. Like just like I did like, you know, some of the ways that they did like structure the actual, you know, sort of thriller sequencing, the way that it accumulates kind of like some of the strange details when they first arrive, that like obviously there's a language barrier for these two British characters who are in France, and quite a lot of the French characters speak French actually without subtitles or translation. And I did notice that was not just my copy. It actually, they did that deliberately to heighten the sort of sense of confusion these characters are in.
If you're bilingual, it is a different experience.
Yeah,
like they're just talking mad shit.
Yeah, like literally one of the subtitles I'm almost sure on my copy that I watched was like speaking ominous language or something. And I was like, it's French, but
ominous language.
An Englishman made that subtitle.
The French, they're up to no good.
You know, so there's the language barrier, but then there's also, you know, it leads to miscommunications with the staff on, you know, selecting their rooms. And there's this bit where, you know, like the valet insists they only had like 4 bags of luggage and like not 5, which is one of the first examples of, you know, there might be something, you know, afoot here, but also just like great use of mirrors and obviously the matte painting backdrops in the hotel room and just like curtains and wallpaper. Like, I don't know, this whole hotel set and the way that it kind of did make you a little bit like we're showing you the geography of this so that we can then hit you with like the great optical illusion moment of, you know, her and her brother going to their separate rooms and, you know, waking up the next day for the exhibition day and going out, and all of a sudden going down the hallway and her brother's room, which was down the hall from her that we saw 3 or 4 different times and different angles of, the door is just no longer there. And all of a sudden she is like, you know, immediately like, well, that my brain doesn't register that doesn't make sense. She goes to the room next door. There's someone else in there. And all of the hotel staff are immediately just like, you're a dumb English woman.
Yeah, you came here by yourself. Yeah. You signed up by yourself.
You dumb bitch. Don't you remember? Like,
it was only yesterday, idiot.
No, it's very funny, and I think Gene Simmons does like a very good job of like, I feel that there's other films in this space where the woman, and it's often a woman, is like, oh, you're right, I'm insane, I'm so sorry. But Gene Simmons is like, no. Like,
she pushes back right away and pretty hard. And it leads to a great back and forth with some of the supporting characters, my favorite of which was the elderly black dressed, smirking Madame hostess played by Kathleen.
Like, as much as
Nesbitt.
I do concede that like this film is deficient in characterization because it is trying to do so much in so little time on such a little budget. Mm-hmm. I do appreciate that Gene Simmons is like afforded some spunk, mm-hmm. And like some level of uppityness. I think that's fun.
She does take a little bit of a back seat in the second half to her boyfriend getting to go detective mode versus her. I would have liked to seen her a little bit more involved there, but she's giving a good performance.
That's Dick Beauregard. That's if Dick Beauregard is in your film, there's no fighting him for screen time.
Yeah, there is this
movie logic.
There is this element to it where, we were talking about how it has the kind of the mysterious element and it almost horror-esque, this like psychological horror thing. And then with the character George, who becomes almost a big part of being the answers to her problems because he's the one connection to the brother that she does have as evidence. There's kind of like a romantic seed that takes place a little bit, but it doesn't flourish into anything too much. I do find that by the second half of the movie, it kind of tries to balance almost three different perspectives at the same time, and I think it loses a little bit of what it was doing so successfully in the first half. But that being said, I do like all of the characters that are put into the situation. It's just I was really enjoying Simmons and specifically her perspective seems to be the most significant. So her versus Nesbitt in the early goings is like maybe my favorite stuff in the movie, where you just have like this creepy woman, but very sinisterly insisting that everything we just saw did not happen, and Gene Simmons being like, that literally doesn't make sense, and it's actually really scary that you keep denying that this is a thing, and like that like the way that like she insists that she didn't even check both of them in, and that the room number doesn't exist, and that like according to their logs she checked in alone and it doesn't recall her ever having a brother, and full out just being like, not only are you mistaken, you're a fucking mad woman and your imagination is going crazy, and this is not at all a nefarious plot by the hotel staff, by the way. And then the further that she goes
by
to
the
try
way,
to prove
no
herself,
conspiracy.
and the further that she goes to prove herself, then the hotel people aren't just going like, oh, well, maybe she's confused or whatever. They start to be, a little bit more malicious, and they're like, well, she just wants to get out of her bill because she doesn't have any money, and so she tries to. They try to flip it that way. So they really do put her in a situation by the by the second half of this.
Yeah, I mean, she's forced to go to the British consul to report it, who says, like they can't go to the French police with such a strange accusation without any sort of proof, and which is what sparks her to kind of go noir detective mode and actually try and find some. And she does end up also going to the police a little early, and I was shocked that they even did the due diligence of even asking around for her when they go to like the night porter and the valet, who all maintain the hostess's story that there's not much for him to do. And which is when she goes to the chambermaid, Nina, who is Zena Marshall from Dr. No, speaking of Bond. It was a girl that the French woman she bonded with over just the excitement of riding the exhibition hot air balloon. And I think it's because she says like her French boyfriend like runs the balloon or something. He's the one who like operates it or whatever, and she's literally like trying to go to her to be like, do you remember my brother? And as she pulls up, literally the hot air balloon takes off into the sky.
She's like screaming over the crowd like at the exhibition, being like, Nina's like, hi,
I can't hear you, I'm going on a hot air balloon.
And just that shot of the balloon bursting into flames in the background after rising into the air, and all the people watching just like screaming in horror as these characters fall to their death. Like, this was the one where I went, oh, she is in like a dangerous like conspiratorial cover up, and like this is weird, which we'll get into it later, but that doesn't come back, right? That doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And like I truly think
so. Was that just an accident? Did the French just...
No, it's just a red herring. A red herring in the shape of a big old balloon going up in smoke.
It's really funny to think like the two people that were doing that, they're like, oh man, when she gets back down on the ground, our whole plan's going to be foiled. And then they burst into flames, and they're like,
so this is
sick.
What luck.
I was going to say, Jamie, like one thing I think this film does that I can't, it's been a minute since I've seen A Lady Vanishes and films like that, but this film like isn't just from Gene Simmons' perspective. Like there are scenes where it's just the brother and sister who run the hotel. So like we are aware that they are up to something. Like that's not in question. It's just a question of what is it? And I think that's fascinating. Like there's no kind of psychological or kind of spiritual kind of element to it, which there often are in films like this, like these gaslighty type films. Like it is it is very obvious that they are hiding something because they are trailing her to the exhibition and to the British consulate to make sure that to see what she's up to.
And so the only thing that she does that is legitimately projecting craziness is assuming that they are all murderers who killed those people on the hot air balloon. And the movie makes you believe that based on how it's like putting everything together. The
biggest gaslighter in this whole situation is Terence Fisher.
So are we definitely establishing in this scene that it is an accident? Because I'm still like,
oh no, it's just an accident. It's truly just an accident.
To me, it felt like it. Yeah, I guess so. It just.
I mean, they don't address it. They literally don't address it. We'll never know. We will never know because the characters at the end of the film, when they get the final reveal and they find out there was sort of a reason for everything that they were doing, and they kind of go, oh, okay, I don't know. Which I still think was a little weird. I was like, I don't think they needed to. They should have been like, that's a really elaborate way to do what it is that you did.
Yeah, see, that's why I got so confused.
But no one asks the question, wait, well, did you murder the people in the hot air balloon? So we'll just never know.
I think they were just like, it's the middle of the film. We need to keep people engaged. Let's blow something up.
Oh, it worked.
And we need to get rid of these characters somehow, the information they hold.
I think this secured Terence Fisher's career. Like, I think if you look at Bond films, there's always like whenever there's a dip in energy, something goes boom. And I think this man knows how people work. He knows.
Well, what Bond films did Terence Fisher do? Am I crazy? I don't think he did. I've seen enough of the Bond films that I don't think that he directed any of them.
Regardless of if he's actually on billed, I think he is kind of like a grandpa of that legacy of kind of like British genre film.
I was going to say the hot air balloon exploding is why you get exciting things happening in Curse of Frankenstein.
Oh, true. I mean, listen, also just, it's probably not a bad storytelling advice to just like blow something up at the 45-minute mark.
No, it's great.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting
never reference it again. Just blow it up and don't
definitely
ask
escalates her to being like, feeling really overwhelmed and really powerless, which is, what helps her connect with the George Hathaway character, who was really her only saving grace to her case, that she just had a chance run in with this guy, this like dashing British gentleman and painter who was also there on their first night out. And by happenstance, he was the last person to see her brother before he retired to his room for the night. And as they arrived back at the same hotel late with his date and her mother, which is like a weird subplot that they try to get into the like romantic element, but he tried to essentially borrow 50 francs off of his brother in the middle of the night for cab fare, promising to pay him back in the morning, and so he could get his name and his room number. So having that specific details of, this guy told me his name, he told me what room he's in, so the hotel staff are fucking with you, and I can confirm.
Yeah,
that.
like rewatching it, fresh, or not fresh, the opposite of fresh. Rewatching it, it's so obvious that Dick Beauregard is like the best witness ever. Like, you could not.
Is that how you say his name too, Dick Beauregard?
Am I saying it wrong? Am I embarrassing myself on pod?
No, you would not be embarrassing yourself at all, because I mispronounce at least 10 names every single episode and people yell at me for it.
Hold on.
I think it's Dirk.
Dirk Bogard, I think.
Yeah.
Sir Dirk Bogard.
Sir Dirk.
To clarify. Yeah.
Freud
That's a sick
just
name.
Like spinning like a fucking wind turbine with me calling him Dick. Anyway, DB Cooper is
also
like
born, by the way, Derek Jules Gaspard Ulrich Neven Van Den Bogard.
Dude, that guy came from
Why
money.
did he change it? What the fuck
That's
is
a
that
money name? That's one of the money names right there.
That's crazy.
His parents spent so much mental energy naming their child, and I'm here butchering his name.
That dude's a prince.
Fuck, man. Anyway,
that's
DB
awesome.
Cooper,
Either way, incredibly
like,
handsome man. You might remember from The Servant and The Night Porter and very many Luchino Visconti films like Death in Venice and The Damned and all that kind of stuff.
Famously beautiful man, and like very young and attractive here. If you needed further incentive beyond Plague to watch, here you go.
Who, by the way, was only in this movie because he was in love with Gene Simmons and wanted to marry Gene Simmons, and he actually thought the movie sucked. And that was
relatable king.
That was his whole thing. But she was already, I guess, wanting to get married to somebody else, so it never worked out.
It's too bad for him. And for me. I can't time travel and marry Gene Simmons, but he's obviously the guy. Like, he's the perfect witness. And I think the film is trying really hard. Like, on a second watch, this is very clear, to make you forget about him and be like, oh yeah, right, the maid, and she's going to be in a hot air balloon, and you're like, oh cool, a hot air balloon, like, and you just forget about him. So I think that's why it's such a set piece, is because they need a fake out before they're like, and now on to our perfect witness who will also do all of the detective work. Otherwise, it just like feels too easy. Maybe they needed to like pad out the runtime, and they had money to blow up a hot.
Yeah, well, and I think they do establish the connection well, like the fact that, you know, he really does want to pay this guy back who helped him out, so he leaves like a letter under his sister's door because they can't find the door to the other one, asking and it, you know, to get his whereabouts in order to pay him. And, you know, as a result, when she goes back to her room, because the hotel is actually paying to like essentially send her home as like an act of, you know, as they see it, like generosity, to be like, we know that you've been throwing crazy accusations at us, but we want to help you get home. And she goes back to her room and finds that letter on the floor, and it's like the only tangible evidence of her brother's existence, and that obviously she's not crazy, outside of that one incredibly creepy moment where the madam like sneaks into her room in like the shadows of night, and she's sleeping, and she lets slip while she's sleeping that her rooms are expiring past their booking date, not their room. And I was like, that's
like an amateur hour.
Yeah, god damn it, she put such a straight face on.
Internal monologue, just like, fuck.
It is kind of funny that is the one moment, because they were killing it up until that point, in a sense. Like, really had no physical evidence. I know, and like
evidence. The brother sucks more, so it's so funny that like the sister who's doing such a good job is the one to blow it, and it's like,
yeah, exactly. There's even a part where when they do start to, you know, all the evidence is kind of piling up and they are starting to get in trouble, where the sister looks at the brother, because he keeps like a brooch or something like that. Like
yeah. She like slaps him upside the head. She's like, you fucking idiot.
Imbecile. Yeah. And I'm like, you're the one who did the worst slip of the tongue I've ever heard in my life. It's like, you're both pretty dumb.
Yeah, I will say I do like the actual detective sequences themselves. I was a little less hot on like the scenes where like she goes and meets him at his studio, and then there's like the whole thing where the other girls who are trying to marry this like handsome British man are like jealous of that, and like there's this whole, you know, sort of weird like melodrama that doesn't seem to matter kind of happening on the side of the movie, but the connection between Gene Simmons and Bogart as they are going through, you know, she's so relieved that he's like corroborating her story, that the brother obviously traveled with her in Paris and doesn't think that she's like lying or mad. In fact, he's like extremely confused by all of her questions. She's like, why are you being so intense about me just like saying that I spoke to your brother for a minute? Like, this is like, I don't really, he doesn't realize the situation she's in. And then when he does and has it explained to her, he does offer to do the hotel snooping for her under the guise of just being like another wealthy patron, and like booking a room and analyzing the sign-in ledger and doing that great scene where he stays up late at night so he can like stealthily spy on all the shadowy sort of comings and goings of the hotel room, which is maybe the most like suspenseful sequence in the movie, when like I think about like when he's hiding behind the door while like the one employee comes in who's like going to the washroom in the middle of the night, or that bit where he like grabs the maintenance keys and he walks by the like snoring night clerk so he can like access the safe with the ledger, which is where like he finds the brooch and finds all of the stolen materials that prove that, you know, they stole that bag of luggage from the brother or whatever. And it's all shot in these just like great perspective angles, I think, to heighten the geographical tension of like what it is that, you know, he's doing, how he's navigating it.
And this also, like, again, we don't know as an audience member yet why they're doing any of this. So when he returns and he tells Vicky what's going on, she's just incredibly concerned for like why they would, well, she doesn't know what happened, kidnap her brother, kill her brother, whatever it is, for so little. And so I kind of like that it kind of builds this extra paranoia into her character before we do get the big reveal of why they're doing what they're doing. And then it kind of it gets into this cool detective thing where they come together and they start to do almost like a little Mission Impossible action beat where they set up a rope on the balconies because they realize that there are 6 balconies but only 5 rooms. So they're like, well, there must be something.
And she shows up in like the mask for like a masked ball type thing, which is like where the movie poster comes from. It's a cool little like get up.
Yeah, it becomes kind of like, you know, it's what you see in like spy movies or whatever, but you know that this is much more low key. And so I kind of like that they're taking on those action beats, and it turns out too, that they've covered up the room, and that's what they discover when they start swinging from balcony to balcony.
That's one of the coolest shots in the thing when they realize that when he explains like on the outside there's 6 balconies, but there's only 5 doors, so there's very clearly a room missing. And so when they figure that out and they access the brother's old room by the hopping the balconies and going into the neighboring one, breaking through the wall, but that image of them breaking through the like plastered over door
it's so good
in front of all the people in the hallway is incredible. And the way the music builds and the way that also it rhymes obviously with that image of that optical illusion of that door being there and now it being a wall, and having them just like tangibly fucking break through it in front of everyone, and the Madame like fainting, and like it really does build its tension and its climax and like all of this stuff really, really well. And then it just kind of just goes, and here's why. It's a very funny climb, like
Okay, but like, listen, the here's why is so fun.
It's so wild. I think why it's wild is just when you start to think of the logistics of their plan and like what
it does make sense. It's just like it's
such an elaborate scheme for something that like made sense. They're doing
so much. Like speaking of the wall, it's like there's a moment like really early in the film where the sister is like walking past some workers and she's like in French.
Yeah.
You're not done doing these repairs yet. And they're like, yeah, if it wasn't so fucking busy, like we'd have been done. And so they're like still around. And so if you're a second time viewer, you can intuit like, okay, well, they were still around. So she could be like rush job overnight plaster on this door frame. And it's like all that just to not lose like how much money to like have people stay here during the World's Fair. Like,
yeah.
Like, and even then on the money level, it's like you would risk like contracting plague for this. like I don't know, which like maybe this is just like because we're in the afterglow of a recent pandemic, but it's like surely the math ain't math in there, like especially if
paying those overtime hours alone for those guys to build that wall definitely did not save them much money in the long run during this entire...
And it's like, were you motivated by like like ensuring that the city of Paris could get money or just your hotel? Like, it's like, it's all very relatable, but also absurd in a way that I find actually more relatable, where it's like, yeah, I guess you'd panic.
Well, and I mean, I also just found the way that they dole it out quite funny, where it starts with them like interrogating, her and the brother, so that they point out that that the brother is at this like French nun hospital, where they where they mention it takes so long to figure it out too. Like, we don't have a Mr. Barton here, but we do have an Englishman who was brought with a gunshot wound and who has succumbed to his wounds. And then they take her in there, and she's like, yeah, this guy who's been shot in the face, that's not my brother, by the way. And then another doctor comes out and is like, oh yeah, your brother actually is in here. He's just so sick you can't visit him. And then, oh, by the way, you can visit him, and just don't touch him. And then she tries to touch. I was like, he has the black plague. Stop.
Classic French bureaucracy experience.
And then once they do all of that, you get like the site of Psycho wrap up, where they all just say, yeah, so it turns out that the hotel, your brother contracted the plague in the hotel room, and they just basically came up with the most elaborate possible way to protect their reputation and to keep the tourism industry afloat, at least throughout the weekend. So they literally kidnapped your brother, made you believe that there wasn't a room that he was ever staying in, put him in a subterranean hospital so that they could take care of him, and then she just leaves with her new boyfriend, and I was like, is she even like gonna take him home? Is he gonna live? I don't know.
I might have missed this
also
detail.
Did anyone murder the people in the hot air balloon? Like that was
no one got murdered.
We need to
It
get
was an
answers on that. That's the sequel.
It was an accident.
Who murdered the people in the hot air balloon?
Yeah.
At the Taylor Swift Eras Tour remake, we will finally get answers with the hot air balloon.
I demand answers. Oh my god.
I don't know. I just like I feel that there's as absurd as it is when you say all the facts in a row. I do think like, and we witnessed this during COVID, like people are willing to do really dumb, self-sabotaging shit.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And to save
my
face.
issue is not that it's not plausible. I think it's 100% plausible. I think it's just very funny that they were so gaslit so intensely, and the reaction is, "Oh, all right, fair enough." You know,
yes,
I guess.
agree.
You know?
The
that makes sense. I guess
saving Paris and your business.
It being a like 2 minutes to credits reveal is crazy. Like I totally agree with you on that front. I think the first time I watched this, I was like, I guess. I was like, I guess
I had so many questions, and then it was like the end. I'm like, okay.
Which is like, I think it'd be so
recalibrate
funny
here.
to finish like every mystery like that. It'd be like, what was the plague? It's like, oh, well, fair enough.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Where did they? By the way, did they establish like when they found out that the brother had the plague? Was it like it somehow in the middle of the night, or it's off the boat? Okay, that makes sense.
No, so like I think at one point there's a medical practitioner or like either a doctor or like a whatever government health person, and they mention that they came from Naples, and he's like, Naples, oh, and you get the sense that like he knows something about Naples.
Right.
But then again, I don't think the script is trying very hard in that. Like, I think the Black Plague is very much a like, I gotta wrap this shit up. Like, so like, I don't think you need to overthink it too much. But I got the sense, like, especially on the second watch, that like homie was sick on the boat. Homie got off the boat.
Yeah, which is why he's a stick in the mud.
Yeah, which is why like don't spoil everyone's fucking fun at the fair, my guy. Like it's kind of this like nightmare as an older stick in the mud sibling of being like, first of all, I'm dragging you down when you think I'm healthy, and then I got the plague. Now I'm really a downer. Like, I do not deny that it's a ridiculous way to end a movie, but I do think it's very funny.
I mean, it's still very weird and amusing as an ending. It's just it's one of those things where I actually think it's so effective and handsome and kind of atmospheric in how it builds to
this is a
its
very
reveal.
handsome film. That's definitely the word.
Just having such a silly shrug of like, yeah, that was it, and you're like, oh, okay.
Which is
Fair enough.
why it's imperative that you double bill it with Panic in the Streets.
True.
Yeah.
Because that
real
dovetail
concern for the public.
ties the room together.
Well, yeah, I mean, and we'll talk about it, but I actually think that they're good at different things. Like, I actually think this one is really good at the tension and suspense building and the paranoia and the atmosphere. And I think Panic in the Streets has some of that, but it's much more in depth with its characters and developing that than this movie. Like, they have different things that they're focused on based on, you know, kind of who made them. Like, if you would you believe it, the guy who got famous doing gothic hammer horror was more interested in all of the gothic mystery and the Hitchcockian gaslighting paranoia than he was necessarily some of the more character driven elements of the movie. But if we are pivoting towards reductive rating round, this was still a solid 3 for me. Like, I do think that this urban legend of the vanishing hotel room is just like a cool concept. And I think Fisher, you know, does a pretty, you know, he has a steady hand in terms of, you know, really nailing the production design and the costume design. And I do like Gene Simmons and Dirk Bogarde just like wandering this like 19th century like Parisian hotel, and the, you know, sort of eerie, shadowy tension of, you know, even though you really don't for very long think that she's going crazy or is mad or anything, and you really do, very quickly you're like, yeah, this is a pretty blatant plot by the hotel staff to just like make her seem that way. But it doesn't make it any less creepy. It actually made it creepier for me in the old lady's performance, that she was so obviously being, like didn't believe what, there was almost like a twinkle in her eye that went, you can't challenge me on this. All the evidence is on my side because I've staged this. And there was something, I liked that aspect of it. And again, Fisher's really good at some of the specific moments, like the optical illusion of the door first disappearing when the brother's room is suddenly missing, all of the geographical suspense sequences of Bogart, like doing his like midnight amateur sleuthing and breaking into the rooms and hopping balconies and doing that, and again climaxing on just that incredible door smashing reveal, which was one of the strongest moments in the movie. And that was the only thing for me, is it built to such an incredible place, and I immediately just went, well, they haven't quite put as much work into developing the characters, so that means when the movie ends on people talking to each other and their emotional responses to what they're hearing, I was kind of like, oh, there's not a whole lot going on under the hood here of just the cursory gist of like who these characters are when we're first introduced.
This is Meg's trick.
and the romantic angle, other than the fact that the two young actors obviously have chemistry together, is just a little bit undercooked. And for me, it definitely was when the last shot is like those two like walking away, and I went, so no more questions about anyone who died in a hot air balloon. No more questions about how the brother's getting home safely. No more. You're just gonna listen to these people be like, yeah, look, your brother got the plague in the hotel, so this giant elaborate gaslighting scheme was to just keep the hotel open for a little bit longer, which again is a very plausible thing that you could imagine characters doing. It's just so funny that looking into the blank faces of these two young actors just being like, okay, thanks for letting us know, is kind of the ending of the movie.
Could have saved us a lot of trouble, actually.
They literally walk away like, we're gonna go make out in the corner now.
Yeah, we're gonna get our own hotel room now.
Thanks for all the Hitchcockian stress that we just went under.
Yeah. That was the real Paris Expo, was Hitchcock gaslighting.
But yeah, good movie.
Yeah, I liked it too. I would 3 it as well. I do think that there's some strong direction in here. I think that it does eventually, but with the second half, I don't like that Simmons does kind of take a back seat to some characters that we haven't spent as much time with. I get why they do it. I just wish it in more moments it felt more like they were coming together to solve it rather than they're just taking over. That being said, though, I do think that Simmons has she gives off a really great performance, doing first that kind of paranoia turned into determination, and I think she does a really good job of that. Even when the George and the police chief kind of take the reins a little bit, it still feels like she has like a confidence and a determination that is beside them. I just wish that she took more of the forefront of that, but it's still really good. And yeah, and Josh, I agree that Nesbitt that plays the Madame is really good at this kind of like confident gaslighter, that she's almost relishing in the fact that she's getting away with this rather than just trying to get away with it. It feels like her character's having more fun than she should be with it. And that kind of does give a more sinister quality to her character, which is cool. I did like that scene when they finally get into the secret hotel room, and before they destroy the wall, they also like tear down the dresser and destroy a chandelier and shit. It's just, it is cool to watch them do that after, there's just been this pristine hotel that has caused, specifically, I guess, Simmons' character so much dread and stress. So for her to be able to just kind of go punk rock and start destroying everything was kind of awesome. Yeah, I do think the ending is a bit funny, just given the pacing of it, I think, and it does appear to be overly convoluted. I think that maybe with, I don't know, more of I don't know how they would do it, but it just feels like that reveal 2 minutes before the finish line, and it's such a massive reveal, like he's got the plague. Just feels so big compared to the time we get to really wrestle with it.
By the way, do you guys want to know the US re-release title for this movie?
Yeah.
Oh no.
The Black Curse.
No.
There you go.
Could you imagine going into the movie and it's literally called The Black Curse? You're like, why is this movie called The Black Curse?
See,
Gonna happen? When is
So
it
Long
gonna
at the Fair
happen?
is perfect because you're like, this is gonna be a nice time.
Yeah, you're gonna do the Jeff Goldblum like that. Well, there it is.
God damn it.
But yeah, it's so I think a solid 3, and it is fun to just have another entry into the we can't trust the French cinema. So great stuff. 3 stars.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm like a 3.5. I just like most Sunday matinee movies are really colorful and like I'm thinking about like things like The Court Jester are very like high energy and like whatever. And I just love that there's a Sunday morning matinee film for goths. Like this is like dreary November morning viewing, like the coffee. Like your brain's not awake yet. You're not really like dialed in to pacing. I think this is like perfect viewing. I don't know. I think it's like a crunchy little treat for the morning. I don't think this film is gonna like rock your world or anything.
Meg is describing movies the way that her dog would describe movies.
Like it's just like it's sometimes you just want a crunchy little treat for a film, and I think that's what this is. Like it's got everything you want. It's got a hot boy, it's got a hot lady, it's got the plague. Those are the 3 things I want in a movie.
I like the idea of Ruby reviews. It's like a nice bowl of dry kibble in the morning.
Not bad.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I just think it's like a very well-made, handsomely crafted film that like kind of screws the pooch at the end and like is like, I don't know, like plague, and I think it's very like funny. I just think that's like I think this film should be watched between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9. I think that's the ideal viewing window in my opinion.
There you go. Criterion Channel, 7 a.m. and 9. Everyone listening, that's what you got to do.
I'm telling you, I just think
Jamie's like, I'm not even up yet.
Yeah.
to start your day.
I'm just going to bed.
Last time Jamie watched a morning movie was TIFF when he was forced to.
That might be the only
Dude, you
time.
I hesitate to put this on the record, but my ultimate morning movie watch, like my best morning viewing experience was Angst.
Oh my God.
I watched that at like 6 a.m. and was like riding high for the rest of the day. I was like, I can't talk.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Also, apologies to Terence Young. I know you exist and that you directed multiple James Bond movies. There's too many British men named Terence.
There it was.
Excuse.
Okay. So you did think that Terence Fisher was the guy who directed From Russia with Love and Dr. No.
I actually have the plague and I can't answer that question. So
She's in delirium. Yeah.
Just so you know, our Discord patrons run a thing called Bondvember, where they spend a lot of November watching Bond movies.
I've seen every Bond
just made
movie.
an enemy of every single one of them.
I've seen every Bond movie. I'm just dumb. I have rocks for brains. Okay. Like,
hey, Terrence and British. It wasn't the worst mistake ever.
No, I was too focused on Gene Simmons and Dirk.
And you know what? From Russia with Love could have used an Oliver Reed werewolf in it too. You know, like there's a pitch here.
I mean, ideally, every Bond film has Oliver Reed werewolf mode in it.
That would
can't
make
have what we want, can
pretty
we?
good, I think. Yeah.
Just
every
during
movie
the
with Oliver Reed.
underwater sequence in Thunderball, if just like Frankenstein just showed up,
the creature.
People would be pretty hype. I feel like.
Yeah.
Amazing. I actually do think an idea like, oh man, we're so off track. We the train. This is
we're
not
off the rails.
unstoppable. But like, you know how like the whole like physics of Oliver Reed werewolf is like, don't get drunk and don't have fun and don't go whoring. I feel like it'd be so funny if those werewolf logics applied to James Bond, because he'd be like, I have nothing left. Like, that's my whole deal. What do you mean? Anyway, Hollywood, call me. I'm full of ideas between this and Taylor Swift Plague movie.
Yeah.
Email me.
If there's another British Terrence out there, we have an idea for a movie for you.
Yeah. I think they stopped making them in the 70s, but I could be wrong.
But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for So Long at the Fair. We are going to be right back, and we are going to be talking about Panic in the Streets. Stick around.
You two men, listen to me. I've got something to tell you.
My favorite plague conspiracy theory is that the bacteria was living underground and that the mass earthquakes that happened around the Roman times released it from the earth. And that's how it like started to spread in marmot populations. And that's how it got to Rome. I just love the idea of like an earthquake releasing a bacteria that becomes a world historical plague.
That's straight up just a horror movie. That's pretty wild.
Dude, I do know that there is a line of thought that thinks it came from space on a meteorite, which I don't buy. I think that's too out there. Earthquake plague,
That'd be cool.
I'm in. Meteorite plague, I'm out. Like,
all right, Jamie, you need to leave all this in. Our listeners need to hear
no!
this.
Aliens sending us biological weapons.
They just need to know that the rodent tier list of rodents you want to avoid for plague, rats, bottom of the tier. They're like very basic bitches. And then gerbils are next. Gerbils get like pretty bad plague. The worst are marmots and like prairie dogs because they're like, they've been around, like they are patient zero for plague. So plague has had to work really, really hard to be virulent in them because they've got such good resistance, which means that when it transfers to humans, we get fucked up. So if you hear about marmot plague, run away.
So the prairie dogs are the strong boys in this game.
Yeah, dude. Next time you go to Saskatchewan, you see a prairie dog, fucking throw a rock at it. Tell it to fuck off. Rats are friends.
One of the taglines on the poster for this movie, by the way, is just "Watch out" with 2 exclamation marks.
Yeah, they're saying "Watch out" for marmots. They're like,
that's the implication of those words. Anytime I hear someone say "watch out," I'm like, "Oh fuck, there's a marmot."
Where's the marmot? Anyway,
all right, let's get into it.
The only reason the Mongols didn't invade all of Europe was because of plague. I'm just saying, the plague changed everything, guys, including a couple of film noir films that were made slightly more interesting by involving the plague. That's all I got.
That's true. We're talking about Panic in the Streets, also known as Port of Entry, also known as Outbreak. It went through a bunch of different titles. It is the 1950 American film noir thriller directed by Elia Kazan, written by Richard Murphy and Daniel Fuchs, and starring Richard Widmark as a public health officer who teams up with the veteran police captain, played by Paul Douglas, on a manhunt to find a vicious gangster murderer, played by a very impossibly young Jack Palance.
And impossibly tall, like 12 feet tall minimum.
They did that on purpose. They're dead 100%. Those are like 5 foot tall actors.
No. I think he's, what is it, 25 feet tall? I think that's how tall Jack Palance is.
Yeah, he's pretty tall too.
He does have that kind of that same lankiness that we were talking about with Cleef for the big combo.
Oh, him and Cleef got like some similar facial features there too, like very
Skeletor
very sharp
Lankoff.
and menacing stuff going on there, which makes sense because he may or may not in this movie be spreading the pneumonic plague around New Orleans, which is the titular Panic in the Streets, or what the actually there is no they stopped this before the panic hits the streets, but they are worried
More
about
like
it possibly
pandemic in the streets.
That's right. This is our first time talking about Elia Kazan. So,
and this is the only Elia Kazan film that I've ever seen.
Me too.
Like, I'm one and done.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
that's
Josh is kind of
crazy.
The expert here.
We're all bad people.
That is nuts. He is obviously an incredibly acclaimed American filmmaker who got his start as a stage theater actor in New York in the 1930s, and eventually rose to prominence as a director of theater for his mountings of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman and Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire, starring a then up-and-coming actor you may have heard of named Marlon Brando, who then went on to be in Kazan's iconic film version of the play as well. He also co-founded the Actors Studio run by Lee Strasberg, which became the central hub for teaching method acting. So this is like,
I love that Josh is like, hey, this is like an incredibly important role, like historical figure in Hollywood and acting broadly. And we're like, who? Elia? And what the fuck? Like, love to sandbag this incredibly important man.
Yes, but he's also got a history that has resulted in people, I think, being a little younger people, maybe being a little less interested in catching up with some of his movies. Please
cut this out if I'm not correct. Is he anti-commie?
Yes.
Is he like...
He was the guy. I mean, we'll get into this. Because he's famous for a whole lot of reasons, but he's also unfortunately quite famous for being one of the main figures to name names during Joseph McCarthy's founding of Hollywood blacklisting of the un-American quote unquote artists who had affiliations with the Communist Party, which we've talked about quite a lot on the show. How many different artists we like and writers we like, and how many people were hounded out of Hollywood, and partially they were hounded due to him naming all of the people, because he did attend a few meetings and he knew basically everyone who was there. And so he did literally rat out his friends, and it is a testament to his skill as a director that there are a lot of people who obviously are still, fuck with his movies a lot. Orson Welles at the time did not. He was like, that guy's a fucking asshole.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a great director. There's also, like, I see here that this movie had a lot of edits because of the Hays Code, which is interesting. Just because
serves him right in hindsight.
Yeah, he would have been like a voice for it in a sense then, right? So it's interesting that it is cutting up his work.
Yeah, I feel demonstrably less guilty about not having watched this guy's shit now that I know that he's a rat fink. Whoops. Sorry for platforming him.
That's the thing that's unfortunate, is that like he was so important in terms of getting some of these amazing performances out of these young actors. Like he worked with Brando, he worked with James Dean in East of Eden, Warren Beatty and Natalie Wood in one of their best movies together, which is Splendor in the Grass. He was considered one of the all-time great sort of like actors, directors, and like Stanley Kramer was someone who was also attracted to pretty socially and politically conscious kind of melodramas that tackled, issues facing sort of American families and kind of young people. But he did so in a very like naturalistic and kind of a realist style. Like he considered himself like not someone who was good at like Hollywood spectacle, and he was instead really more focused on the camera developing character and emotion and sort of thematic depth. And when Brando was talking about him, he described him as like just one of the most stimulating directors he ever worked with in terms of like encouraging improvisation and, incorporating reality and getting sort of emotionally involved in the experiences of the actors, which is something I think you can feel in a lot of his movies. And you can even feel in movies where, something like On the Waterfront, which is, I'm surprised neither of you have seen it, because it is literally the movie that is about
clearly
a brave...
it's because I knew that he was a rat fink and not because I just never got around to it.
Yeah, well, On the Waterfront is the one that I think some people, it is just such an undeniably incredibly made and incredibly acted movie. It's literally about a brave dock worker who stands up against a corrupt union leader, and it is pretty explicitly about making himself into a hero for ratting out his friends and ruining their careers to save his own. Like that's kind of the text of the movie. And it's so good that people just kind of go, oh, that's not really what it's about though. It's like, it's a corrupt union boss. That's all it's about. There's nothing else going on there.
Oh no. This is my horror movie that I'm currently living.
Yeah.
Whoops.
But he was a very skilled director, and I think that this is a good case
clearly.
For
his
his what he could do behind the camera, because this is based on a short story by Edward Anhalt titled "Some Like It Cold."
Very good.
Yeah, that was published in Dime Detective magazine, and the screenplay was written by kind of a who's who. Like, there's like 4 or 5 different names on the screenplay, but from what I understand, it's mostly written, I think, by Richard Murphy, who did the movie Cry of the City, which I definitely think has a similar sensibility to this, and how it develops a kind of desperate sort of ground level suspense out of the kind of like on the run noir elements, but doing so in the with the sort of loose concept of also kind of being a community morality tale in a similar way. And yeah, I do think that this is kind of a case of someone who was able to kind of come in and take what kind of sounds like it would be like it's a cool concept for a movie, that there would be like doing like an epidemic thriller version of like a manhunt procedural noir, where the idea is that, a gangster, is carrying the plague, and the detective is a literal public health worker who's just trying to be like, hey, everyone believe me that there's bad things. Science, everyone. And they're all like, we don't believe in that. And, like that's a cool idea for a movie. You could see that being incredibly pulpy. And I do think it's interesting that, Kazan, who, in my opinion, this has like less of an interest in like the ticking time clock thriller component.
Yeah,
and he's really, really interested in like the people and the characters, and his background in theater really does help him find, I think, very fully dimensional characters who would exist on the ground, and how they might respond to this, particular situation, which is kind of the life of this movie.
Yeah, he has a lot of examples of just showing the community kind of all together. Like there, even if it's like the criminal community, like at one point he's interrogating a bunch of people because he thinks they might be connected to the murder that is that is connected to the plague issue that they're dealing with. And he just the way that he directs it, he like flows the camera through the room so that you can see everybody interacting with everyone. And then there's also another example when they're in the coroner office where he's going to inspect the body, and as the camera follows him into a room, he'll have the room behind them, like behind a window or something, with the lights turn on, and then characters are also interacting in that different space. And then of course there's the interrogations or the questioning of people, where you're going from like different community to different community and just learning about the way they live, what their fears are, kind of establishing what Widmark's character needs to know and all of that. But there's a heavy emphasis on people.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it definitely also, putting it beside So Long at the Fair, like, is a uncharitable comparison to So Long at the Fair, because So Long at the Fair is like so uninterested in developing deep characters. It's like, we got to get in and get out. We have places to be, and this one definitely like sits with the characters, criminals, health workers, their partners. This is a great film for like the women in the lives of these men. Like, every woman in this movie has 7 times the IQ points of their partners. It's so funny. Like, every time a woman is on screen, she's like, hey, you should probably tell him that you have the plague. Or like, hey, looks like you're...
Well, you're clearly forgetting the one woman who dies for saying they should lie about the plague.
Conspicuously, yes, I am forgetting her.
She's like the one person who dies, like, except for the main victim who gets murdered. But he was going to die of the plague. Oh no, I guess the other guy dies too. But he also kind of gets murdered too. But he's also dying of plague before he's murdered. There's a couple people.
3 out of 4 women in this movie. More than half of the women in this movie are very smart, which is fun. But there's like interesting dynamics. Like, it's so rare in a noir film where the partner of the detective is like a stay-at-home domestic mom who gets to like have prolonged conversations with her partner about like the economics of the household and like family planning. Like, there's like some interesting,
I thought about that too,
slower, intimate beats that I think make this kind of like a distinct, not only noir, but like epidemic thriller. Like, I do think these noirs that we're talking about are kind of maybe the first epidemic thrillers, like for like what we would later see, especially in the 90s with things like Actual Outbreak, not
Contagion Heads. You should be watching Panic in the Streets.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely like it. It's got, both these films actually have very interesting pacing decisions in very different directions, and I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like this one started in a way that I thought it was going to be a little bit more intense, because like the opening is pretty fantastic with the like dingy card game den above the sort of like shadowy New Orleans street with like the faint sounds of the jazz club below, and how that gets interrupted by, you know, the one sort of immigrant guy named Kolchak who's like very clearly, you know, ill due to he's got a cold or he's clammy or, you know, something's going on, and we find out that it is the plague, but it results in nobody knows that. What they all think is that he's just he came in fresh off the boat, won a card game, and they're like, and now he's trying to leave without giving us a chance to win our money back. Fuck this fucking guy. So they chase him, you know, through a railway crossing into this industrial shipping yard by he's being chased by the goons of this ruthless, ice cold gangster Blackie, played by, once again,
who again
Jack
is 20
Palance.
feet tall. He's so tall.
He's unbelievable, and this is his first role, just before he'd be Oscar nominated for Shane a few years later. And you know, even though as a kid for me he was just the old gangster guy in the Tim Burton Batman, that's like literally what his what I think about when I see his face. But he chases this guy down, and he very casually shoots him down for the crime of winning his money at cards, and his body is then sort of like resurfaced by, you know, some of the sort of local cops, and they take him to the coroner, and his sickness is revealed to be not just an excuse to run out and keep the money for himself, but he was suffering from the pneumonic plague, which is identified by
That's such a good moment when like the cops are like, well, he died because he got shot, and the doctors are like, yeah, we know, but if you look a little deeper, he would have died like 2 hours later from the fucking plague.
Yeah, but I also just like, again, the character personality, the fact that like the coroners are like talking about like their lunch plans or whatever, and then they're going, wow,
like, do you want a good spaghetti? Like,
yeah,
oh, maybe not.
Like, yeah, this guy's got the plague, I think. Maybe call in our U.S. Public Health Service doctor, the Mr. Lieutenant Commander Clint Reed, played by, honestly, one of my favorite actors, Richard Widmark.
He's
so good.
He's playing against what I know him from anyway, which is more like his Night in the City and Pick Up on South Street, where he plays like a much grittier guy. I mean, he's playing a straight up, you know, hero role here, where he's just determined to save the day. So it was interesting.
But still getting to play the hero as if he was like a sweaty, wide-eyed, stressed, and desperate. Like this, like it's so funny. Yeah. Like all of the things he uses when he plays a pickpocket or like a con artist or whatever he's playing that he does incredibly well. He gets to deploy all of those exact same things here, but it just in a situation where you're like, oh yeah, like that absolutely makes sense. He's like not the scumbag of this movie. He's just like responding to a horrible situation.
Yeah.
Multiple points in the film where he's like sweaty in like a warehouse or like a tenement house, and he's just like, I'm a fucking doctor, like I can cure you, you just have to fucking tell me what, like give me the info. Like he's trying to shake people up, and he's like, I will cure you, I am a doctor. Like, that is so funny.
One thing I really liked about the movie, and something I was still honestly a little bit confused about what the film was doing sometimes as well, where he does wield his power in a sense that sometimes feels over the top, and I couldn't quite tell if the movie was wrestling with that or if it was like justifying every action he took along the way. So some of the time I wasn't quite sure, but I still think you could read it either way in a sense. Because there's just moments where he's like, you know, when the press, for instance, finds out that this plague could possibly take over the entire city and then in the entire country, they want to tell the people, and they think they have the right, and then he literally jails that reporter so that he doesn't spread the news. So there's just these moments where I feel like there could be more. There's a little bit more thorniness, and I'm unsure if the movie wrestles with it entirely, but it's still really well done and interesting in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that his overall quest is obviously meant to be incredibly self-righteous and heroic, and he is meant to be on some level like the guy who actually cares and like is smart enough to be able to actually prevent this from happening, and everyone needs to shut up and listen to him. And right. I do think that does rub up weirdly against the fact that he does team up with a like veteran, like clearly authoritarian cop and they end up having a great relationship, and they're just like, yeah, I believe in government confident being able to, like kind
Knowing
of
that
like
Elia Kazan
mistreat
directed
these
this,
various
it's all
poor
coming
characters
together,
who
baby.
shouldn't have any reason to keep secrets from us. And I was like, I don't know. You took that a little one step further than I thought you were going to take it.
Because that's the thing. It's like the movie presents it like everything ends up working out in that sense for the better. So you're like, okay, like he's wielding his power, I guess, in the correct way, somewhat. It's just
he wants to help the poor people. They're just too stupid to know that.
So I think we can agree that like if Elia Kazan had put all of his anti-commie energy into anti-plague energy, it would have been like he would have been a really good. They didn't have public health officials in the 1300s, but like that was his calling. He just missed it by a couple hundred years.
Yeah, I find it just that he most of the time I really enjoy his character. It's just there were those subtle moments where I went, I'm just not sure if that was like as heroic as the film is presenting it as, and I was always wrestling with that.
I definitely had the same experience, but then part of my brain also went, am I doing that because it's Widmark and he just has that vibe to me? Like I do think about
noir.
Sometimes.
Like I do think noirs, like I think a hallmark of the genre is protagonists where you're like, is that street legal? Like
for sure.
Yeah, but Widmark is also, I'm just so used to seeing him also as someone who's just like kind of ruthlessly kind of pathetic or depressing in some capacity. Like I think about that scene in Night in the City where he goes to his girlfriend's apartment and she's so happy to see him despite knowing that he's only ever there when like he's in trouble and like needs to be bailed out. There's something so sad about the way that he's like putting on a performance in front of her and all of this. And it's a literal opposing contrast to the focus on the family and home that takes place like in this movie. Like all of the scenes between him and enjoying his day off with his wife Nancy, played by Barbara Bel Geddes from Vertigo, and their kid Tommy, it's like it's adorable. It's like these little like walk and talk sequences that go from him like painting outside with his kid who's like giving him lessons on how to do it right, which is supposed to give us an idea of how often he's home to do like traditional dad stuff, to him like being annoyed having to answer the emergency work call in while discussing financial problems with her, and clearly being the softie in the relationship who wants to give the kid a quarter more than his usual allowance so he can go to the movies with his friends. And I don't know, there's so much warmth and personality to these characters, and like clearly Kazan cares about making them these fully dimensional people, and to the point where it does overpower the thriller component, because there's a part where you keep thinking, you're like, oh, we're getting to the part where they're finally going to hunt down the guy. And we stop for like a 5 to 10 minute scene where he has like an argument with his wife. And it's a fantastic scene. I actually love the staging and the blocking of him like stripping his infected clothes off and like keeping a distance from her on the couch, and the way that it frames them across the room. And they're having like a very authentic and real feeling like marital spat that you would imagine like an actual couple having. And, he's dealing with, his own sort of psychological perspective on like how much he lashes out and can be an asshole, which is maybe like one of the few moments in the movie where you do go, yeah, maybe this movie was interrogating some of his behavior and the way that he just like all of a sudden, gets temperamental. But it's just, it's one of those things where you're like, most filmmakers would have been like, well, for economy purposes, we need to keep the excitement up. And this movie is like less interested in doing that. And,
hey, do we have a hot air balloon that we can blow up?
That's what they needed. They needed Richard Widmark to watch a hot air balloon explode.
Yeah, it is much more focused on like the sense of community and what's at stake, I guess, is what it is. They're really trying to emphasize why he's so sweaty and panicked and just wants somebody to listen to him. Because going back to his family, it's just like at the core of what what you care about. So I think it is a smart idea to kind of sometimes I guess it does mess up the pacing a little bit, just because you are on that pacing that goes like, I need to get to the next interview, I need to get to the next answer. But those reminders of what's at stake, I think, are pretty essential. So yeah, I again, there's a few things I wrestle with this movie. It's like, I like what it's doing. It's just sometimes I don't like where it's placed, maybe.
It's interesting watching these two films back to back too, because like So Long at the Fair is so like, do not cause panic, we need to get money from people. like very like this the pressure is on not letting the secret get out in order to make money, or to like have business as usual turn a profit, whereas this film is like kind of interested, like not fully, but there's the background buzz of we can't let this get out because if people leave, we'll lose our leads to like track down the criminals who know where this originated. It'll
make contract tracing really difficult if everyone just runs away scared.
Which does make sense, and I do like that.
It's the same kind of like desire, which is like nobody move, everyone be really calm, but for very different motivations, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, and I do think that is a good reason for him to start wielding those. The power that he has, sometimes maybe overextending that power even, because you do recognize it's like if they don't get this one guy, then the entire country could just be destroyed. Everyone could just die. So it is.
And he's also the one character who believes that. I think it's really important that like a lot of the rest of the government officials are pretty skeptical of him, like, and really do think that, this is like trying to merge a kind of epidemic thriller with like a criminal, sort of like manhunt procedural and all of that. And it's a great hook for the movie and everything like that. But it really is like the Reed character is the only one who genuinely believes that that's the movie that they're in. And he's the one taking it very seriously. He's sterilizing the facility, he's burning the clothes, he's cremating the body, he's giving all of the employees like the shot and pulling, quarantine like martial law and sounding the alarm on the mayor and the health commissioner that they need to find this guy before like the Black Death and the panic around it begins to spread. And that's when they pair him up with almost Odd Couple style with the grumpy old like police captain veteran Tom Warren, played by Paul Douglas, who is very skeptical of his claim and also sees him as just kind of like a careerist nerd, which is fueled in like one brief moment where we find out about his backstory of distrusting doctors due to misdiagnosing his dead wife. Again, that feels like a detail that like another movie just might not leave in. I think that's actually, again, it's a very humanizing detail for this character. And, but nonetheless, he's charged by the mayor with dropping all other crime in the city to find this shooting suspect. And the way that he goes, look, I get that you're a scientist and I get that this is like important to you. I think you're kind of exaggerating. And what you want to do is like logistically impossible. And the way that and that's why I kind of like the dynamic they ended up having where, he shows him what he has to do as a cop in order to, sort of like be the tool that this guy needs him to be. And he's like, dude, I kind of have to abuse my power a little bit. Like there's scenes of like him herding like various Slavic immigrants for questioning. Right. And it's literally just a bunch of people. Like it's very clearly like an ethnically targeted, like, look, here's all these poor immigrants, shove them all in and we're going to interrogate them looking for a needle in a haystack. And, it is kind of like a dark process. And I do think some of that is on purpose.
Yeah, and there are also scenes where, and again, I think it makes sense given the perspective and the urgency. It's just, it does feel strange here and there where it's almost like his character is constantly justified. There's one example where he's talking to people and they're not believing him. I can't remember the specific scene, but they're not believing him. And he's just urging them to get inoculated. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, fair enough. And in this specific scene,
also again, speaking of inoculated, you cannot inoculate against the plague. That's not a thing. Like. Anyway.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's
anyway, this is the hill I'm gonna fucking die on. I'm just saying, like, give them antibiotics. Antibiotics work against the plague perfectly well. Just say that.
They definitely don't.
That's my beef with Elia Kazan.
Meg's plague nerd brain just started like tweaking out in the middle of the movie. She's like, I can't deal with this.
Yeah, correct. I was like, actually, it's actually not a virus. Like,
this would do nothing, and you're only making it worse for everyone. But in this scene, he's trying to get everybody inoculated and quarantined and everything like that. And as they're not believing him, a body is literally like taken out and they see it. And then they're like, oh, okay, I believe you now. I'm going to do everything that you say. So I do. And again, there's these things where I think in another movie that would piss me off more, it would feel more just like it's too... it's not challenging our lead enough. You know, it's just justifying every single thing that he's saying and that people should do. But again, it's like we're talking about a plague that could destroy the entire country. So you feel like you kind of have to scale that a little bit with what he's doing. It's just
unfortunately we experienced this, so people like just hilariously not believing a guy who's saying that, hey, it's kind of a public health problem that there's like a plague out there, was very believable to watch in this movie. For sure. Unfortunately,
absolutely.
If anything, the least plausible thing is not that there's like a pneumonic plague that they could solve with a vaccine. It's how easily they could resolve it. I was like, no, there would be a lot of New Orleans lockdowns and Richard Widmark going insane, being forced to stay at home.
Then they need to start going into like, he needed to start discovering like QAnon cults and shit like that, you know, along the way.
But, 1950 QAnon.
Get the anti-vaxxer crew that he'd have to start talking to.
The film that I think, if this was a triple header, is The Killer That Stalked New York, which is more similar to this than So Long at the Fair. It's a similar like criminal on the run who like doesn't want to be found from the cops. They think for criminal reasons, but they also have an illness and they're like infecting the city. And it's set in New York, and the illness is smallpox. And it is very public health. Like the film was released hot on like between very like within like a good 10-year range of the Spanish flu. And so like there's a whole section that is just like a public health advertisement about the importance of getting vaccinated. And there's a whole section of the film dedicated to anti-vaxxers, which is wild. So like if any of this tickles your fancy and you want to just slap another film on there, if you're like, where are the anti-vaxxers in all this? They're in The Killer That Stalked New York. That's where they're all.
Wow. Okay. That sort of was what I was thinking about. So there you go. I'm going to have to check it out now.
So you want to know why there are no anti-vaxxers in this, Josh? It's because you can't vaccinate against the fucking plague, baby.
That doesn't stop them from doing it in this movie, though.
That's true. They could have been like, I won't take antibiotics. I guess, is that a whole different strain of wacko?
Yeah,
there's
maybe.
Anti-vax and then antibiotics with like multiple X's.
You can't do antibiotics. You'd have to be their probiotics.
The yogurt lobby.
Okay, before we get too crazy here, we need to talk about Richard Widmark and all of this. For me, what was the best stuff in the movie was him going around the various community locations and actually, you know, really showing his dedication to the work, because that's what he has to prove is, you know, you do think you're going to get a little bit more of like a conventional, like the cop and the health worker are going to kind of like become buddies. They're going to kind of begrudgingly earn each other's respect. And I do think that sort of happens on the periphery of this movie, but like, it's not really the dramatic thrust of the movie. The dramatic thrust of the movie is how dedicated this public health worker is to going like essentially kind of undercover into the community and being like, I am going to literally do the contact tracing myself and put myself in the position of possibly catching the plague in order to retrace the steps of wherever this like gangster victim came from and who he was connected to and where it could be spreading to next. And the reason I think that some of this stuff is the best stuff in the movie is partially due to Kazan and his cinematographer Joseph McDonald's choice to shoot this, from what I could tell, basically entirely on location in New Orleans. There are fantastic locations in this movie. McDonald, obviously also an incredible cinematographer who shot John Ford's My Darling Clementine, Nicholas Ray's Bigger Than Life, Sam Fuller's Pickup on South Street, speaking of Widmark. And so this has some incredible, like it's a mix basically of like doing these like film noir expressionist shadows and atmosphere, but doing so in these very authentic neo-realist, almost like docu-fiction New Orleans locations where you really do spend time in these various like dock worker union facilities, or like there's a stretch where they're just going to like immigrant restaurant owners, or they're going to like shipping warehouses, and the way that it just like picks up the texture of this like actual sort of like blue collar spaces, and the way that it's been populated with these unique faces and kind of personalities, because most of the supporting cast, from what I understand, was also filled out with non-actors. I think they said like over 100 of the actors who appear in this movie are just like locals who live in New Orleans and are like actual working class people. And so that's a huge, so when you have Widmark, like Widmark is literally being just like thrown into these like actual communities with these actual people and being like, guys, I am, I'm literally like the public health worker version of a noir detective, and I need to talk to you guys. And that's like mostly what the middle of the movie is. And I think a lot of it is fantastic. Like when he goes into the Maritime Union Hall to pass photos of the illegally sort of like smuggled guy to see if one of the the boat workers will break sort of the seaman union code to talk to him.
I know, and the guy who's like, you're asking us to admit.
I don't know. Come on, buddy.
I did pick up on that. That should have been my first clue that this was that Elia Kazan. Whoops. But like, the moment where the guy's like, hey, buddy, I'm going to pull you aside. You're asking us to snitch on someone in front of the whole group. Maybe not the right call.
Yeah, but see, that's just it. Is like, I bet you that was just like a real guy who was like, yeah, dude, if your character came in here, like we would just say, who is this fucking outsider? Get the fuck away from us. We don't care if you're going to buy us food and we're like financially desperate. And I think like that's the stuff that really worked for me, because like that leads to him hearing word from like the woman and her sailor friend who fight over wanting to say anything because they become scared by the talk of sickness and all of that. But at least that other fantastic scene where he goes and he finds the ship that the guy came in on, the Nile Queen, which is an incredible location. Just those long shots of the background where you can see the endless water, and you get the shots of like the sort of the seaplane sort of like landing around the boat, and it leads to that incredible moment where there's that one pan where Widmark goes, he's talking to the captain who's like, does want to cover up the fact that they kind of do illegally smuggle things into the country. And he goes, if you're covering up that a man with the plague arrived here on your boat, then you, and just huge pan over to the dozens of like boat workers watching the conversation, huge pause on all of them staring. You and your crew will be dead before you reach San Diego. And it erupts in like an awesome like fight where the camera is panning across like seamen like rolling around and the black fumes behind them. And I don't know, it's like, I just loved the look. I loved the fact that they threw Widmark into these real locations with these real guys, and was like genuinely interested in investigating, I guess what you could say is the, real lives that these characters live, their sense of desperation, their class history, the financial reasons they might want to lie to him, their distrust of the government and cops, and you get a sense of all of this stuff.
Yeah. It is very funny to me that like Widmark's like, whatever, like he's like, we can't like freak people out about the plague, because then whatever, the guilty parties will leave,
and then he just screams plague at like blue collar workers every 2 seconds.
Multiple points in the film he's like, you gotta tell me because of the plague. It's like, get your story straight, dude. Like, anyway, very funny.
It's like his one card.
Yeah, he has one card, and it's the stakes are plague, which is an incredible card. But it's just very funny that he's telling different stories to different people about how much of the story he's going to leak.
Yeah, I think, and Kazan too has, is it Kazan or Kazan, by the way? Doesn't matter.
Oh, everyone's going to scream at us for that one too.
I don't think we have to pronounce his name correctly. Matter. Actually, I think we can do it wrong.
We are practicing class solidarity by mispronouncing his name if we're mispronouncing.
Yeah. That's right. That's our protest. Yeah. Take that. Anyway.
Take that.
Orson Welles' skeleton gives us a little thumbs up.
But I do love that he just kind of has the camera kind of either sit or pan through a scene rather than having all of these jump cuts like shoulder to shoulder or anything like that. It really does feel like he gets to live in the space that he goes to, each and every community. Not cutting away, just it does give that hangout vibe. There's also this And I mean urgent hangout, by the way. There's also this train yard
Urgent
scene in the very this train yard scene in the opening that we were talking about. But it's the same kind of idea, but he adds, I guess, more of a thriller aspect to it because it's more of an action scene. But he does not cut the camera away whatsoever. He kind of sits it so that you can see all of the tracks. And you see the chase take place, but they're kind of far away. And honestly, it looks unsafe. At one point, it looks like one of the guys almost gets hit by an actual train that while they're crossing. It's pretty awesome. And then it starts to pan kind of to the left, and they switch. And in the way
there's that great like silhouette shot. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the way that the lighting switches, I think it's within the same shot too, because they're using kind of like a background light where there's this big silo or something that he's kind of they're running around to avoid each other. It's great. I like that he sits in with the characters a lot of the time, both in the action and then when they're doing dialogue. We were saying that he comes from play direction, right? In some capacity.
Yeah.
So that makes sense that he would kind of want them to really sit in the scene rather than cut back and forth.
Yeah, it's very visually striking though for like a theater director to like the way he operates the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the third act fucking under the dock brawl. Like like we're jumping the gun, but I'm such a fan of inconvenient places to have a final act fight. And I think under the docks of like a commercial dock is so good. And just like Jack Palance's lanky ass body trying to like crawl through the like guts of this dock away from the cops is so cinematic for a guy whose background is theater. Like you can't obviously do that on stage, and it's so fucking cool.
Yeah, and I like too that they use like because Blackie the whole time has a very menacing presence. I mean, he like we said, he's like 25 feet tall, so he kind of just overlooms everybody. And
all of his scenes are kind of shot that way, right? Like the fact that like when like all of the scenes with him and the two goons, and one of them, the guy Fitch, played by Zero Mostel, who's the blacklisted actor.
Is that the goon who has the incredible comb over?
One of the worst wet comb overs in movie history.
No,
it's incredible.
I think you mean the best wet comb over.
The best, worst, best, you know, it's a thin line.
So good.
Most powerful comb over.
Yeah.
But I agree. Like all the scenes with him, and they are shot to be a lot more like, you know, because he's like Kolchak's like, he's hunting down his brother Poldy, who is one of the other goons who are, you know, they're scared and they can't leave town because, you know, according to Blackie, there's got to be a reason that they're picking up vibes that every cop in town is huffing and puffing and turning the city over for a crumb, which is a great line that Palance gets, and he nails that line. But I think about like the scenes where he like is putting pressure on them, and you know his assumption is that the corpse was valuable, or maybe he had smuggled goods in, or you know there's got to be some other reason the cops are interested in this. But like the bar scene, for example, there's just wonderful shadows and the way that it's shot, and it did remind me of like all the drinking card playing that goes on in something like My Darling Clementine. Like it just really looks fantastic, and how the lighting hits his just like sharp and like strong like facial features, and you know he plays it to really good effect where he's like he can be, you know, smiley and charming, and then suddenly he's incredibly menacing, and you can really feel him like greedily hounding and cornering the, you know, the underlings while passing himself off, you know, as a vaguely like good figure in the community. Like that bit where he like gives the one dude's brother like cash to go gamble, and they're like, "Oh, thanks, Blackie, like you're the coolest."
Right. Yeah. But then you have those scenes where you know that he's even mixing that a little bit, where he has the sinister quality mixed with the charm. Like there's one part where Poldy is starting to get, you know, sicker, and he's starting to get more suspicious of him and everything, and he's at a table with him and he's talking, and he's kind of giving that pseudo charm, and then he just grabs him by the neck to see, like, because it's something to do with his clothes, like he got new clothes or something like that, and it signifies that he's been to a certain location. But regardless, the jump from,
well, they think that the nice shirts are the smuggled goods that his brother stole. They're like, you're hiding shit, man.
Right. And that jump from like, I'm friendly, I'm Blackie, I'm kind of the leader, but you look up to me, there's mutual respect here, and then the grabbing of the neck is so quick, and
it goes from like massaging the shoulders to grabbing the neck. Like it's a very like intimate, like reassuring, friendly action to like you are now in physical danger.
Yeah, and
it's the 25-foot boss.
While still reassuring him that
Tiny
everything is
mafioso
okay. And that's like another kind of scary part. And so then when you do get to that part where he's just like crawling on his hands and knees underneath the dock, there is a really cool contrast to that you get to see that I really liked. And again, like you guys said, it's very well shot as well.
Yeah, no, that under the dock sequence is like so fantastic. I've always wanted a like third act chase scene on like a slippery wet West Coast beach, like an inconvenient place to have a third act chase. And I think it's been unseated by under the docks of a commercial dock. It's just the worst place to try and apprehend a criminal.
Well, I like too that the spaces when they get there is so open as well, at least before they get even to the bottom of the docks. They're in like the dock warehouse or whatever. And there's a lot of open space. So it leads to like a pretty quick chase scene on foot. But then they also have these things like they have slides to move equipment and all that, so they're sliding down the equipment, and it's just, I don't know. It was pretty exciting to watch, and I wasn't really anticipating that. I thought we were gonna really just focus in on like the suspense of the interrogations and things like that. So it was cool to end on a decent action beat. And I'm not sure if we've skipped some scenes anyone wants to talk about, but we were just talking about the dock thing. So yeah.
Docks.
Yeah, well, I mean, it definitely, I was a little surprised by it because I do think that it's a very like well made and like well staged like little sequence. I was surprised based on how it develops its moments of tension and suspense, how kind of conventional just like classic like chase and gunfight is. Like if you think about the concept of the movie, that it's like it is literally like a pandemic thriller, it's very funny that like the solution to that is like we just like chase a guy and we catch him and arrest him and we're all good.
Yeah, we got
it.
It's done. Hey, we did it. Like,
good job,
like that part to me felt like kind of like a bit of a weird, like undercooked quality to the thrills, because I thought that the more tense moments.
I am here to deliver undercooked third acts. That's the real theme of this film.
Well, it's not, maybe even undercooked's not even the right word, but I do think that there's something to be said about how great the tension is in how difficult this situation is. And there's something to be said about, it's funny that like a health worker just like chases a gangster down and then it's over. Whereas like the scenes where the health worker is like, this is an impossible web to figure, like to actually trace. And this is such a daunting task. And I thought that the tension he builds out of that was some of the strongest stuff, because I mean, going back to maybe some of the scenes, like one of my favorite moments is when he goes to the Union Dock, he goes to the boat. They discover, I think, through the sick cook that the stowaways boarded at Oran in like North Africa and kept asking them to make lamb shish kebab while in the hold. So from that, they discern that the men are like Greek or Armenian. There's a lot of
but he likes this food.
I don't know there's a lot of race science being done by our characters in this movie.
Elia?
It seems to work every time.
Yeah, it does. Because it leads them to start asking questions at all the local Greek restaurants, which is so funny. But it gets to this like background conversation with the owner and his wife, and this is what I was talking about, where it just like breaks from their perspective briefly to be like the owner and his wife of the restaurant do remember seeing him, but they lie because they don't want to have their joint shut down, because they literally just passed like their public health inspection, and the idea of like being told that they had like a plague infested guy. This is like maybe the characters. It's funny. It's kind of the same argument that they make in So Long at the Fair, but you actually see it from like the sad perspective of characters making that choice and being like, on one level, the wife is kind of downplaying the danger that they're in, but at the same time, the movie is, I think, sympathetic to, the casual desperation of characters trying to stay afloat that lead to these circumstances. And when you start to realize that what Widmark is dealing with as a noir detective is like, how do I solve broad class problems that make people distrust me and want to lie to me? And I can't do that. And so it just, to me, I thought the suspense of of that, and how that does end up, you know, obviously developing into the wife dies a few hours later and the husband is fucking devastated. And at one point they even like kind of try to own the husband, to be like, well, that's what you get for lying to the cops. Your wife fucking died. And I just felt so bad for the guy.
Yeah, that was wild, dude. I put that in my notes too. I was like, holy shit. I don't think we need to be doing that.
There's
to the
literally
public.
a line that's like, well, maybe if you'd confessed, your wife would still be alive. And like the character's given a beat of like, what?
He's like,
yeah,
holy shit,
he's literally so depressed being fed that line. And, you know, so, and like, this was the stuff where, again, I thought there was some complications and I thought there was an interesting tension you don't normally see in like a noir movie, but also that rubbed up against like these actual character realities and personalities. And I just went, this is like so kind of complicated in a way. It's, and even though it still gives you the thrills of Widmark like running around town and sweating and shouting at the level of danger everyone's in, and him being a, you know, public health version of a detective, like it's giving you those thrills and giving you this more complicated stuff. And so for me, when it ended up resulting, even though it was, you know, perfectly, I think, competently shot and like a, you know, a perfectly thrilling sequence, I think I definitely, when it got to
Jamie and I just like, turns out an exploding balloon / dock chase. Jamie and I are like, yay!
I will say the start to the sequence I think is incredible when Poldy is like now on the run.
Or the human moment where like the security guard at the dock is like, oh hey Blackie, my best friend, like how you doing? And then like 5 seconds later he shoots him and you're like, oh damn, like okay.
I thought that was great.
No, I was thinking of the part where, because like at a certain point they do find out that like Poldy is the guy that they're looking for. I think they find out from that restaurant owner, and it's so Blackie and Clint and the detective are all after this guy, and you know the pressure to announce to the public is mounting. It's when they throw the journalist in jail for threatening to break the story and inform the people, which is a bit of a funny gesture. And the mayor's like freaking out at them and saying, you know, you have 4 hours to find your man before the morning paper runs and all this. But the scene where Blackie gets to him first and barges into his room, and you get that great frame of Palance in the door frame, slowly taking his jacket off, and
fucking
the worst one, climbing into bed with him so that he can start like slapping and choking. And the way that camera moves from Poldy being framed so that he's like sick in bed and you see his face in the mirror, to the mirror is overwhelmed by Palance's just being his massive frame, and then slowly the camera getting closer to both of them while he like squeezes him into the corner of the frame by just like getting closer into bed with him, which I don't know why that detail like freaked me out, that he was basically just like, I'm going to take away your room in this bed. And I know it doesn't sound very menacing, but he plays it incredibly menacing, and then obviously starts literally trying to choke him to death. So
there's the kind of like other kind of audience perspective where it's like, no, Jack Palance, he has the plague, like don't get near him. like the kind of other level of horror of just like, oh, I would not climb into bed with the plague victim. What are you doing?
Yeah, and it's such a specific way to use your physicality to be menacing too, where you're just like, you wouldn't think, like that's a very specific detail. It's not just like he's tall and he like puts you in a corner. It's like he literally climbs into your bed and slowly just starts taking up more and more of the space.
I'm literally getting chills. The idea of like a Slenderman framed mob boss being like, my intimidation tactic is climbing into your bed while you're sick is like so bad. Fuck.
Josh, what's that movie? It hasn't come out yet, actually, so this will be a little ad.
I was actually thinking the same thing, so I wasn't going to say anything, but there is a movie that we saw at TIFF this year called The Order. It comes out in December. People should check it out.
Yes,
it's Jude Law going Gene Hackman mode with
he's embracing his balding, I see.
And he does,
yes.
I won't spoil it in any specifics, but he does a thing where he's in someone's space, and he does it in a way that I've never seen it before. And it's
literally like an interrogation intimidation tactic where you're like, he's with a dude in a jail cell, and the way that he gets closer to him and just like you're just like, dude, that's just so uncomfortable. Don't do that. Stop doing that.
It's so unnatural. Yeah, it's wild.
I will not even tell you where my brain is going. This is fantastic news.
Yeah. Any Jude Law heads in the house, it'll be a great time.
So look out for it in December. But no, Jamie's spot on. I was thinking of like the exact same thing when I was watching this scene, because I was like, here you go. Now I've seen another character do something sort of similar, and it was.
Can you imagine being feverish in bed and then you like kind of open your eyes and the whole door frame is just filled with jack-o'-lanterns?
That is terrifying, honestly.
I'd kill myself. I'd be like, I'm done.
Yeah, that is terrifying.
You're slowly, your brain is like leaking out of your ears. You're going into like a delirious like fever dream essentially, and you're like, oh, there's Jack Palance there. Yeah. Which I will say leads to an incredible moment where the doctors roll up and they're like, dude, you're not gonna beat any information out of this man. Like his brain is like not there anymore. He's dying. And so they go, eventually he goes, okay, fine, I guess I'll carry him out on a stretcher. Within 5 seconds of him carrying him down the stairs on a stretcher, Richard Widmark shows up and is like, hey, is that my man Poldy? I got some questions for him. And without even thinking that like, well, the guy can't rat you out because his brain doesn't work.
They don't skip a beat.
Like they could have just been like, here you go. Yeah, here, have him. We're heading out. He instead dumps his body over the railing, instantly killing him and then running away. And they go, okay, well, clearly that's the guy we're after.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. It's
a very incriminating decision that he suddenly makes.
Beyond holding the dead body. But yeah, so this is the start.
That was maybe the most shocked that I was that body just like literally smashes on the ground. And they're like, that guy's dead.
So loud, my dog jumped. I was like, oh.
This is where we get the finale chase scene that we were kind of alluding to.
They book it to the shipping warehouse on the docks for what is a pretty cool final chase when they're running around, like the conveyor belts with pineapples and sliding down the chutes of like what looks like bags of rice. It really is a fantastic location, and I do like the physicality of Palance like rolling over the Palance rolling over the sacks during the gunfight. And like, and having Widmark just like try to de-escalate by telling, hey, I'm an unarmed doctor just trying to give you a shot, bro.
You know what it reminded me of? Do you guys remember? Do you guys know that viral clip of that guy on the plane who's like, I want to shake your hand? That's what it reminded me of. Of just like someone aggressively trying to do something like
nice for somebody.
Nice.
Yeah. Just let me save your fucking life.
Like threatening, let me save your life. But no, I don't really like the stuff in the warehouse is like, I've seen that before. What I have not seen is a scuffle / arrest / escape from the cops underneath of the dock.
Oh yeah. I also think just having like all the workers around and like having that factory look like it's being worked in as the chase is going on and the camera's like running with them and stuff. Like it feels it does feel pretty exciting given just everything that has been more anti-action, and on purposely so, and good. I just like that we finally got this point where it's like Blackie is completely caught red-handed to the point where he's like, I'm just going to book it. That's all I have left. I'm just going to run my ass off here.
Use my lanky ass Slenderman legs and get out of here.
And at one point he just like murders a worker too. He's just like, yep.
Fine. Yeah, murders a guard, murders a worker. He's really trying to get out of there. And then this is I love this ending, honestly. It builds to this almost, I would call in a good way, anticlimactic ending where Blackie just starts to climb a big rope that is leading to the ship so that he can try to escape.
It's one of those like mooring lines, I think they call them.
Yeah. And so he gets about halfway and, some of the guards are panicked or whatever. And then one guy's just like, hey, just let him do it. Just let him do it. And they sit there.
Well, yeah, he's getting progressively weaker because he also has the plague.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And they sit there in silence, and it literally does let you just sit there with them as he climbs and fails. And he gets to a certain point, starts hanging, keeps hanging, and just lets go and drops into the water, like just flops.
I love that it's in like a wide shot in the background of the frame too, where they're just like, yep, that was inevitable. Let's go fish him out.
Yep, it's literally behind the two characters watching him like, we know this guy's gonna fail. It's just a comedy beat. It's very funny and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, that's a great moment. And there's something comedic too about just the entire thing of just like literally an unarmed doctor running in there and being like, how can I reach this hot-headed, trigger-happy gangster?
I want to shake your hand. That's the whole vibe of the last part of the film for me. For a thing that can't be inoculated. Meg told me about it.
Yep. And then it's funny that it literally is that we've been watching this really complicated web of class and health and all of this. Or like it can't be figured out. And it's like, well, the gangster fell in the water. So everyone, we did it, guys. And do you know what? A public health officer and an authoritarian cop can both give each other a nice smirk at the end of the movie and be like, we kind of like each other a little bit more. The government won today.
Yeah. Big win for the feds.
Yeah, we
through
love
the power of locking up journalists and calling all of the pores stupid and secret.
This Elia Kazan.
Do what you gotta do to save the world, all right? What I do like this one detail though, where just on a character level, where they get a call for like a barking dog and they're disappointed at first and they're like, wait a minute, this is way fucking better than the plague.
That's awesome. Actually, we should go back to our boring lives.
Yeah, he's like, stop wanting excitement. Let's just go back to our wife, our kid, and the barking dog in the neighborhood. That's fine with me. I think that
he does return home and he's excited to pay his bill and have his wife stop nagging him about paying his bill.
That's right.
That's the ending of the movie. And actually, he even teases her because he goes, "Look, you thought I wasn't going to do it, but I paid the bill."
I stopped a huge plague epidemic and I paid the bill. So
man.
That's great.
I guess you could
one
say
of these
I'm
is
kind
way
of
more important to the
for
health of
sure.
our relationship than the other one, and you won't guess which one it is.
And yeah, that's Panic in the Streets.
That's Panic in the Streets, baby. Yeah. If we are pivoting towards the reductive rating round, this one honestly ended up getting to like it is a little bit of a lighter 4, but it ended up getting to the 4 for me because similar to Jamie, there was definitely a part of me where maybe I was like, maybe because it's Kazan, I'm reading into it, but I did have some things where I was like, I don't know if it necessarily works as much of a ticking time clock thriller as like another filmmaker who's really skilled. Like Sam Fuller, I think would have made this something else entirely.
2,500% more sweat.
Yes, and I did have definitely a reservation or two about some of the vaguely kind of like anti-public, pro-authority, elements where you're just like, yeah, this movie seems just as annoyed about working class solidarity and informed journalists as it is like crime and like people not believing in a health epidemic and all of this stuff. But outside of like those factors, I was like, this is just such a great example of someone bringing their own unique touch to what is the conventions of like a noir thriller. Like on just on a surface level right away, it's already a sort of like unique and cool concept for, a noir where the public health worker is a noir detective and the murderer is a guy carrying the plague and you're about to start a pandemic. So that's a cool idea in and of itself. I think anyone makes that movie, it was probably pretty exciting and pretty fun. But I do think that Kazan's touch and his background in theater and really giving this, really fully dimensional characters and really unique faces and personalities, and even just the idea to shoot it in a kind of neo-realist style where he goes all around New Orleans and incorporates non-actors and really does get into the details of why characters maybe, would choose to, like, that's just it, is he does depict these people doing something that the movie, I think, thinks is bad, but at the same time, he's very sympathetic to all of those characters. And, he does show their kind of, their class history and their lives that led to them making some of the decisions that they did, and the way that this kind of thing could spread through this community, and takes pains to really depict this as a community of real people that you kind of care about. And so I think that all of that stuff is like a huge thing that is credit to Kazan. You don't have to hand it to him, but I'm handing that to him. And then otherwise, it does still work as just a solid cat and mouse movie between Richard Widmark, who is very good at being sweaty and anxious and screaming as he always is, and seeing him do it from a heroic perspective of being just like, hey, science, everyone, like medicine, listen to me. And everyone's like, no. And Jack Palance is incredibly menacing and intimidating and charismatic. And he's fantastic as this, psychopathic gangster who's on the run, who's potentially spreading this stuff around. And yeah, it obviously looks and sounds fantastic. I forgot to mention the score too, but it's by Alfred Newman, who did All About Eve and Grapes of Wrath and How Green Was My Valley. There's some sick, like, jazzy piano licks and some, like, brass and horns that are coming up. It makes a lot of sense for a movie set in and around the sort of like New Orleans sort of like jazz clubs and the streets and stuff like that they spend part of the movie in. So all of that is fantastic. And yeah, all the stuff in the dock workers union and the immigrant restaurants and the shipping warehouses, it looks beautiful. How it's staged and the long takes that they do in them and how they use shadows, it all just like really does look fantastic. And so I do think that in terms of just how well made this is and how character focused this is, it's very different than something than the So Long at the Fair, but it's incredibly, incredibly well made. And I, was engaged with it the entire time, despite the fact that I got to the very end and I was like, well, once again, that seemed like a fairly pat resolution to a very sort of like thorny situation the movie depicts that way for most of its runtime. But good movie.
Yeah, I thought it was really good as well. I think I'm going to give it the strong 3. I might even go back to this one of these days just to see if it gets the upgrade, because there's a lot that I like. I was still kind of wrestling with how the film deals with its like authority versus the public and all of that. It's strange because there's moments where it feels so clearly like the power that he's given is being justifiably swung, but then then he has other moments where he does question authority. Like there is that example of the doctor saying, giving them certain instructions, and there's a nurse that's like, "This is not what we should be doing," and because the doctor has the authority, she just has to stop and take the orders and do what she thinks is not the right thing to do. So it's strange that the movie kind of does both of those things, and I still am kind of unclear on which one, it's, if anything, if it's going on one side or the other, I guess. That being said, though, we are in a situation where the lead is, trying to save basically the country. So there is that sense of like, if we don't want to get this plague out, then maybe this kind of authority is necessary in these circumstances. So it just feels a little bit like it's wrestling with itself, to be honest. So that was just a little confusing for me, I guess, at the end of the day. But I think it looks amazing. I do think that Kazan has a good eye, and I like that he sits in the scenes, especially like the dialogue scenes. He doesn't do a lot of cuts. You get to sit with every community member. You get to kind of really take in all of the location work that he does, and a lot of it is very authentic. I don't think most of this looks like real location work rather than a studio. The score has this intensity, very much like the movement of the plot, so I think it suits it well. And yeah, I didn't really know about Kazan's politics going in, so it didn't really affect the way I was looking at the movie. But you can tell, again, going back to the wrestling of like authority versus what the public should know, and that it seems like even he's a little confused. I don't know. He didn't write it, I suppose, so that makes sense as well.
I was gonna say I could pose to you that part of the thing that Widmark deals with in this film is that people aren't ratting their friends out.
Yeah.
Why won't you rat out your friend?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah,
that is a huge roadblock for the character. That he's like, "Why are you guys doing this to me? You're literally spreading the plague."
It should be so easy. The plague is communism. We figured it out.
But yeah, so it's.
But I don't even think he had done it yet when he made this film, though. This came before.
But
I was gonna say I actually think he got praise for this movie because he casted Zero Mostel as the guy with the comb over, because he was a blacklisted actor at the time.
Please, you got me all wrong. Let me show you.
But yeah, no. So yeah, it takes its time with its characters purposefully, and I think that's a good idea. Even though you'd almost expect this thing to have a little bit more of an action-minded brain in some sense, just given the urgency. But I think sitting with all these characters and getting to know the community is essential, because then you also understand the urgency that his character has of wanting to save them and all of that. And the family's cute. So had fun with that. I like that kid's line where at the beginning he's like, he's asking for a quarter to go to the movies, and the dad's like, "Didn't you already spend your allowance?" And he's like, "Hey, money comes and goes. You know how it is." And he's like 8 years old.
Hey, I thought that was really a 50-year-old man trapped in an 8-year-old body. I need my money.
I thought it was really cute and funny. So
want to go see a nudie picture?
Yeah, exactly. With my boys. Yeah. So I enjoyed it. Yeah. So strong 3.
For you, Meg.
Yeah. It's a 3.5, 4 for me. Even though stinky anti-union Elia Kazan made it, you can't deny that it's a really well-crafted film. And I also think I have a soft spot for how generative noir is as a genre. Like, it is very crunchy to me how many kind of subgenres that I enjoy came out of noir. So be that kind of like the more self-aware neo-westerns or erotic thrillers. I also love a pandemic thriller. So it's very fun and anthropological for me to go back to kind of where it all began, which are these noirs that also had the plague.
Shadow. If anyone knows of an earlier epidemic thriller or plague thriller or something, let us know. But is this is this the first one? It might be.
I don't know. I actually don't know when The Killer That Stalked New York is from, which folks should go check out if any of this is resonating with them, because it is very much in dialogue, perhaps by accident, with this film. Same fucking year. Let's go. Oh. Something was in the air in 1950, and it was pneumonic plague.
It was the plague.
We know exactly what was in the air. Yeah.
Except for it's smallpox in The Killer That Stalked New York. But I don't know. I just find it fascinating that they identified the bacteria that is the plague almost within the year that cinema was invented, and we don't have that many plague movies. I'm like, I need more. And I also just think epidemic thrillers are clearly such a hotbed for social issues and kind of social dynamics, especially having lived through a pandemic. It's so obvious that there's such crunchy narrative space in that kind of outbreak zone. And I think there's so much of that in this film, especially in intimate moments, which I don't think So Long at the Fair really gets at. Especially just the quiet scene of the government health worker self-isolating on their porch, just lying down on a bench while she's by the way, second child, and he's don't touch me. I'm covered in germs. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know.
Relatable.
There's just a lot of really specific human moments in this film. And a dock chase, an under the dock chase. So I'm a huge sucker for it. Chase fucking rules. I listen. It's not a big balloon blowing up, but it's pretty good.
And the anticlimactic hang and fall into water makes me laugh so hard. I loved that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, I think a noir is best enjoyed with a cup of coffee early in the morning. And I think you can't find a much better double bill than this, in my opinion, just in terms of keeping it a little weird with your noir watches. If you're a regular Noirvember watcher and you have not encountered a plague noir yet, you gotta dig deeper, baby.
I do love finding the weird offshoot of noir, because it was just such a popular and prolific genre and something you could make so cheaply if you wanted to and make money on it. So they made so many just specifically themed noirs that you can go back to. And this was one I hadn't seen before. So thanks to Meg for showing it to us.
Listen, I'm here to corrupt the youth, and you too, apparently.
Now I have to ask, this is totally unrelated. Is crunchy a Zoomer thing? Am I supposed to be using this?
I'm not a Zoomer. What the fuck? I don't know, like it's something you can chew on, like a fatty piece of meat. That's like what I think of when I say crunchy. Like
I'm just saying that. I'm saying that explicitly because it might not be. I'm saying that specifically because I just rewatched Trap the other night, which is fantastic. I love the movie, the new M. Night movie.
Oh yeah.
But Josh Hartnett takes his daughter to go to like a concert, and he's trying to feel hip, and his daughter teaches him how to say the word crispy as like this house is crispy, and that what you saying it 3 times in your description of that movie made me go, is she she's calling this crispy? Is that what this means? Is it?
I think I'm gonna use crunchy.
I respect the young people.
I had a Josh Hartnett dad moment is what I'm saying.
The 2 Joshes using their one brain cell to be like, what the fuck is this word? No. I respect the youth. I love how they innovate with language. I am purely describing how my thoughts are texturally, like where it's like a big, chunky, fatty piece of meat, or like a big pistachio, where it's like I have to spend some time on it.
I love that. I'm gonna start.
I might be hungry. It honestly might be that I'm hungry, guys. Like,
next time I throw these movies on, I'm gonna get some coffee and I'm gonna get some dry kibble going. And
hey,
and this is
dry kibble or some pistachios. I like. There's pistachio cinema. It takes a little time. You gotta get the shell off. You gotta learn that an anti-commie rat fink made the movie you're watching. It's all good. It's fine.
That's what it's. That is the contradictions of cinema right there, all in one, all in this one discussion. So thanks so much to Meg for coming on and for bringing these films. That is going to wrap it up for
my plague, which is
spreading the Meg plague. That was So Long at the Fair from 1950 and Panic in the Streets from 1950. Meg, if you got anything else to plug while you're here, should people be following you anywhere now that you have quit the Twitter game?
I have. I'm out of the bad place. I'm now on Blue Sky. I'm still at the Worst Nun, trying to court Gene Simmons. I'm like, listen, I'm the worst nun. You should be my wife. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm over there, and I'm on Letterboxd at Meg Shields, and you should watch The Killer That Stalked New York. And you should also, if you want to learn more about the plague, there's a really excellent book called The Great Mortality that has an audiobook now available on Spotify if you're a premium member. And also, if before you look for it on Spotify, you should see if your local library carries it. But it's like the definitive book of the plague, and it's all primary sources. It's all like bitchy little medieval boys being like sassy with each other about living through the plague, and it's really fun.
That does sound great.
Yeah, it's excellent. The Great Mortality is like the text for plague nerds, so I would highly recommend. And yeah. Don't catch the plague. And if you see a marmot, throw a brick at it.
being plugged. Or a prairie dog. Meg is taking the brave anti-plague stance as her final.
Someone
plug.
had to be a public health hero, and I'm so glad that it gets to be me.
So glad that we had the platform to voice you.
Yeah. Well, after this, I'm gonna go chase Jack Palance under a big dock to prove my point. So.
Raising awareness. Awesome. Yeah. Well, for our listeners, we're going to be back in 1 week's time where, as Jamie alluded to already, we're going to be going ambulance mode. We're going to be talking about Martin Scorsese's Bringing Out the Dead from 1999, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary. So we're sneaking it in right at the end here. And we could not think of a better pairing than Larry Cohen's The Ambulance, starring Eric Roberts being hunted down by literally a murderous ambulance.
Let's go. I'm so stoked.
I love Eric Roberts. I love Murderous Ambulances. They're both in one movie. Yep. Only Larry Cohen could bring these two forces of nature together.
It's exactly, and also Eric Roberts is playing like a very fit comic book artist who like hangs out with Stan Lee at one point in the movie. He makes a cameo before Marvel was a thing. It's a very bizarre movie.
Larry Cohen was like, "This one's for the girls." For the girls.
So that's what we're going to be talking about next week over on the Patreon exclusively. But then we're going to be back in 2 weeks' time where we are having we know it's going to be a massive episode. We just know ahead of time. We've had an episode planned actually for, I think, an entire year that we're finally slotting in here.
Jesus Christ.
I've had this pairing locked in for longer than that as well. But we're going to be talking about very snowy, or I guess one of them's only snowy. We're going to be talking about some very depressed revisionist westerns, but one's sort of serenaded by singer-songwriters. We're going to be talking about McCabe and Mrs. Miller by Robert
Vancouver.
Altman,
Woo!
with the Leonard Cohen soundtrack. And we're going to be pairing it with Sam Peckinpah's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, which is going to be connected. I didn't realize this. We're actually kind of timing this with the release of the Timmy Bob Dylan movie.
Look at that.
I did not intend to do that, but we are going to be talking about Bob Dylan when all of the Zoomers are going to get Bob Dylan fever in like the next few weeks here.
I had McCabe and Miss Miller on in the background once when I was visiting family, and my dad walked in and he went, "Is that North Vancouver?" And I was like, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is undeveloped North Vancouver. Take a seat."
It was North Vancouver if like Vaseline was put on a potato, as Meg likes to say.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I go to North Van, I smear my eyes with Vaseline so that I can pretend like I'm in McCabe and Miss Miller.
Yeah, you're in like an antique photograph.
Yeah. Yeah, I just hold up a big plane of glass smeared with petroleum jelly and I'm like, yeah, baby.
So, yes, that is what we're going to be doing in 2 weeks' time over on the main feed. McCabe and Miss Miller and Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Two of the best movies ever. So
such a dream.
Wait. And then, do you know what? To throw it in 3 weeks' time, we're going Nosferatu mode.
Hell yeah.
We have to.
Oh yeah, of course.
We're going to be talking about the original, and we're going to be talking about the original Nosferatu, and we're going to be talking about the Klaus Kinski Nosferatu directed by Werner Herzog. So
no love for Shadow of a Vampire? What the fuck? No, I'm kidding.
Wait, hold on. Which one is that? Not what do you mean?
How Nosferatu was made movie with Willem Dafoe.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I got you. No, we're going 1922 and 1979 Nosferatu. I guess there is a lot of Nosferatus.
I mean, listen, that's a testament to the power of the Nosferatu, that it is IP infringement that still has so many fucking movies.
But
you guys should wear long acrylic nails when you record that episode. I want to.
We will be.
And tap the mic ASMR style.
Yes.
Nosferatu ASMR.
Yes.
Yep. So that's what everyone can expect over the next coming weeks. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, y'all.
Bye.